A librarian became concerned when an 8-year-old girl refused to leave at closing time every day. When she followed her home one evening, what she saw through the window made her call 911 from her car. Eleanor Walsh moved through the quiet stacks of Oakwood Public Library with practiced efficiency, her soft-soled shoes barely making a sound on the worn carpeting. At precisely 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes before closing, she began her nightly ritual, straightening books left askew, collecting abandoned coffee cups, and gently rousing the occasional dozing patron who had surrendered to the library's peaceful embrace. "We'll be closing soon," she whispered to an elderly man nodding off over a newspaper, her voice carrying the particular cadence developed over 15 years as head librarian. Soft but unmistakably authoritative. November in Connecticut had brought early darkness, and beyond the tall windows, streetlights already cast their amber glow over the library's parking lot. Rain tapped insistently against the glass, creating rivulets that distorted the view of the small New England town outside. Eleanor loved this time of day, the library gradually emptying, the quiet deepening, the books seeming to exhale after hours of being handled and read. She made her way toward the children's section, a corner brightened by primary colors and whimsical murals where the afternoon story hour had left scattered picture books and crayon drawings. Most children had departed hours ago, collected by parents after school programs or whisked away to evening activities. But as Eleanor rounded the short bookshelf that separated the children's area from the rest of the library, she saw her, the girl who wouldn't leave. Lily Pearson sat cross-legged on a beanbag chair, her slender frame nearly swallowed by the faded green fabric. Her head was bent over a book, dark brown hair falling forward to shield her face like a curtain. Eleanor paused, watching how the child's finger traced each line of text with deliberate care, how her shoulders hunched slightly, as if to make herself smaller in the space she occupied. "Lily," Eleanor said gently, "we're closing in 15 minutes. The girl looked up, revealing eyes that always startled Eleanor with their intensity. A deep green that seemed to absorb everything they observed. For an 8-year-old, those eyes carried a watchfulness that belonged to someone much older. "I'm almost finished with this chapter," Lily replied, her voice barely audible over the continued drumming of rain. "Can I stay until then?" It was the same request she made every evening, though Eleanor knew from experience that almost finished for Lily could stretch indefinitely. The child had been coming to the library every day after school for nearly 2 months now, and on Saturdays she arrived when the doors opened at 9 and remained until closing. Unlike other regular visitors, retirees searching for companionship, students without internet at home, or the occasional homeless person seeking shelter, Lily came for the books alone. Eleanor had never seen a child so young read with such focused determination. "Of course," Eleanor said, as she always did. "I'll let you know when it's time." While other staff members began shutting down computers and dimming sections of lights, Eleanor returned to the circulation desk to complete the day's filing. From this vantage point, she could observe Lily without being obvious. The girl wore the same outfit she'd had on 2 days earlier, jeans that stopped an inch above her ankles, a navy blue sweater with frayed cuffs, and sneakers whose once white surfaces had faded to gray. Though clean, the clothes hung on her small frame as if borrowed from someone else's closet. Tom Reynolds approached the desk, pushing a cart of books to be reshelved tomorrow. At 48, the reference librarian had the disheveled appearance of someone who spent more time with information than people. His reading glasses perpetually perched atop his thinning hair when not in use. "Our little bookworm is still here, I see," he commented, following Eleanor's gaze. "Every day this week," Eleanor confirmed. "And she's reading well beyond her grade level. Yesterday it was Charlotte's Web. Today it looks like The Secret Garden." Tom adjusted his glasses, peering toward the children's section. No parent ever picks her up. Never. She walks home alone. In this weather? At this hour?" Tom frowned. "Isn't she from the Pine Street Elementary District? That's at least 6 blocks from here." Eleanor nodded, a familiar unease settling in her stomach. "I've offered to call someone for her, but she always says her dad knows where she is and when she'll be home." "Some parents these days," Tom muttered. shaking his head before wheeling his cart toward the back office. At 6 o'clock, Eleanor approached Lily again. The girl had hardly moved, though she'd turned several pages in her book. "We're closing now, Lily," Eleanor said. "You'll need to head home." Lily's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the book's edges before she carefully placed a library bookmark between the pages and closed it with a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her small chest. "Can I check this out?" she asked, holding up The Secret Garden. "Of course." Eleanor took the book, noticing how reluctantly Lily released it. "Do you have your library card with you?" The girl reached into her backpack, a once bright yellow affair now dulled to the color of mustard, and produced a carefully protected card in a Ziploc bag. Eleanor ran it through the scanner, noting that Lily had 8 books already checked out. "These other books are due back next Tuesday," Eleanor said, pointing to the list on the screen. "I'll bring them all back. I always do." There was a hint of pride in Lily's voice, and Eleanor realized it was true. Despite checking out books at the maximum limit allowed for children's cards, Lily never had overdue materials. "I know you will," Eleanor smiled. "You're one of our most responsible patrons." A fleeting smile crossed Lily's face before disappearing, like sunshine momentarily breaking through clouds. She carefully placed the newly borrowed book into her backpack between 2 folders, zipped it closed, and stood. Eleanor watched as the girl methodically buttoned her coat, faded red with a missing button near the bottom, and wrapped a gray scarf around her neck. The movements were precise, adult-like in their efficiency. No wasted motion, no childish fidgeting. "It's raining pretty hard," Eleanor observed, glancing toward the windows where darkness had fully settled. "Are you sure I can't call someone to pick you up?" "I'm not far," Lily said, avoiding the question. "I don't mind the rain." Eleanor hesitated, that nagging discomfort intensifying. It was nearly freezing outside. The rain would likely turn to sleet before long, and the idea of this small girl walking home alone in such conditions troubled her deeply. "I could drive you," she offered. "It would only take a minute." "No, thank you," Lily replied with that same rehearsed precision. "Dad says I shouldn't get in cars with people, even if I know them from somewhere." She adjusted her backpack straps and added, almost as an afterthought, "He worries about me." The statement hung between them, neither entirely convincing nor completely false. Eleanor had been working with children long enough to recognize the complex negotiations they made with truth, what to reveal, what to conceal, what to reshape into more comfortable forms. "All right then," Eleanor conceded. "But take this." She reached beneath the counter and pulled out a compact umbrella kept for emergencies. "You can return it tomorrow." Lily accepted the umbrella with solemn gratitude. "Thank you, Ms. Walsh." "You're welcome, Lily. Get home safely. Okay?" The girl nodded and made her way toward the exit, her small figure passing through pools of light from the dimmed overhead fixtures. Through the glass doors, Eleanor watched as Lily opened the umbrella, nearly as wide as she was tall, and descended the library steps. The child paused at the bottom, seemingly gathering herself before stepping beyond the protective overhang into the steady downpour. Eleanor continued watching until Lily turned the corner and disappeared from view. Only then did she allow herself to voice the concern that had been building for weeks. "Something isn't right," she murmured. "Talking to yourself again?" Tom appeared beside her, keys jingling in his hand as he prepared to lock up. First sign of too many years surrounded by books and not enough people. Eleanor smiled absently. "It's that girl, Lily. I can't put my finger on it, but something about her situation bothers me. The one who just left seems like a normal bookworm to me. We were like that at her age, weren't we? Escaping into stories. It's more than that." Eleanor moved back to the circulation desk, gathering her belongings. "Have you noticed she wears the same 3 outfits in rotation? Or that she never mentions any friends or activities outside of school and coming here?" Tom shrugged, jingling his keys again. "Kids that age who love reading aren't always the most social creatures. Not everyone was organizing playground book clubs like you probably were." "She flinches sometimes," Eleanor continued, ignoring his teasing, "when someone moves too quickly near her. And she's always hungry. I've seen her pocket snacks from the after-school program when she thinks no one's watching. Tom's expression sobered. You're not thinking abuse? Eleanor sighed, pulling on her coat. I don't know what I'm thinking. Maybe she's just a quirky kid who loves books and has a distracted parent. God knows there are plenty of those. But your instincts are telling you otherwise, Tom said, no longer dismissive. They are. Eleanor hefted her bag onto her shoulder. I just don't know what to do about it yet. Outside, the rain had intensified, beating against the library's windows with renewed vigor. Eleanor thought of Lily walking through this deluge, that too large umbrella fighting against the wind, those worn sneakers soaking through within minutes. She thought of the girl arriving at a home that, in Eleanor's imagination, was either empty or unwelcoming. Keep an eye on her, Tom advised as they exited together, huddling under the overhang while he secured the doors. Document anything concerning. But remember, Ellie, we're librarians, not social workers. I know, Eleanor replied, though a voice inside her whispered that sometimes the roles people played in each other's lives couldn't be so neatly categorized, shelved and labeled like the books that surrounded them each day. She drove home through streets glistening with rain, windshield wipers keeping frantic time against the downpour. Her apartment waited across town, quiet, orderly, and predictably empty except for her aging tabby cat, Dickens. At 42, 5 years divorced from a marriage that had dissolved under the weight of mutual indifference, Eleanor had crafted a life that suited her. Books, meaningful work, a small circle of friends, and the occasional weekend visit from her sister's family. It was a good life, if sometimes a lonely one. But as she navigated the rain-slicked streets, Eleanor found herself scanning the sidewalks for a small figure with a yellow backpack and oversized umbrella. She saw only curtains of rain illuminated by streetlights and the occasional hurrying pedestrian. Lily was nowhere to be seen, having vanished into the wet darkness of the November evening. A temporary character exiting the warm, well-lit stage of the library to continue her story elsewhere, in scenes Eleanor could only imagine. The wiper's steady rhythm seemed to echo the thought that had lodged in Eleanor's mind. Something isn't right. Something isn't right. Something isn't right. By the time she reached her apartment, Eleanor had made a decision. Tomorrow, she would begin paying closer attention to the quiet girl with the watchful green eyes. She would look for concrete signs of what her instincts were already telling her. And if necessary, she would find a way to help. What Eleanor couldn't know, as she parked her car and hurried through the rain toward her building, was how that simple decision would ultimately change both their lives, binding their stories together in ways neither could yet imagine. The Saturday morning children's reading circle had always been Eleanor's favorite part of the week. She loved watching young faces light up at the magic of stories coming alive, their spontaneous laughter at funny voices, their wide-eyed wonder at unexpected plot twists. Today, however, her attention kept drifting to the back corner of the children's section, where Lily Pearson sat apart from the group, absorbed in her own book. And that's how the very hungry caterpillar turned into a beautiful butterfly, Eleanor concluded, closing the colorful picture book with a flourish. The circle of children erupted into applause and chatter, some mimicking butterfly wings with their hands. Does anyone have questions about how caterpillars transform? Eleanor asked, smiling as several hands shot upward. As the children discussed metamorphosis with enthusiastic, if not entirely scientific accuracy, Eleanor observed Lily from the corner of her eye. The girl hadn't joined the reading circle, preferring instead her usual spot in the reading nook, a corner Eleanor had decorated with oversized pillows and a small lamp that cast a warm, inviting glow. Unlike the other children who fidgeted, whispered, and constantly shifted positions, Lily remained nearly motionless, her entire being seemingly absorbed into the pages before her. When the reading circle dispersed amid a flurry of parents collecting children and arranging weekend activities, Eleanor made her way to Lily's corner, deliberately keeping her approach casual. That must be quite a story, she commented, noting the book in Lily's hands, a collection of Greek myths for young readers. Lily looked up, momentarily startled as if pulled back from another world. It's about Persephone, she said, her voice quiet but clear. She gets taken to the underworld for part of every year. Ah yes, the goddess of spring, Eleanor nodded, settling onto a nearby cushion without crowding the girl's space. It explains why we have seasons. I think it's sad, Lily said, her fingers tracing the illustration of a young woman reaching toward a flower. She has to leave her mother for months and months, but at least she gets to come back. Something in the way Lily emphasized the last sentence caught Eleanor's attention, a hint of wistfulness that seemed too knowing for an 8-year-old. Some separations are temporary, Eleanor agreed carefully. Others are more permanent, like in the book you checked out earlier this week, Bridge to Terabithia. Have you finished it yet? Lily nodded, closing the mythology book and setting it aside with unusual care. Last night. It was sad when Leslie died, but I liked how Jesse made the bridge stronger afterward and took his sister to Terabithia. He found a way to keep Leslie's memory alive by sharing their special place, Eleanor said. That's one way people cope with loss, by transforming it into something meaningful for others. Lily was quiet for a moment, her eyes focused on her hands folded in her lap. My dad doesn't like to talk about my mom, she finally said, the words coming out in a rush. He put all her pictures in boxes after she died. But I have one under my pillow. From before. The revelation settled between them like a delicate, fragile thing. Eleanor considered her response carefully, aware she was being granted rare access to the girl's closely guarded personal life. Before she got sick? Eleanor asked gently. Lily nodded. Before everything got bad. She looks happy in the picture, and she's holding me at the beach. I was 4, I think. I'm very sorry about your mother, Lily, Eleanor said, resisting the urge to reach out and touch the girl's hand. It must be difficult for both you and your dad. He tries, Lily said, a note of rehearsed defense entering her voice. He just works a lot, and sometimes he gets sad. Adults get sad too, Eleanor acknowledged. How do you feel when you're sad about your mom? Lily's fingers twisted a loose thread on her sweater. The green one today, equally worn as the navy blue she'd had on earlier in the week. I read, she said simply. Books don't go away unless you finish them. And even then, you can start over from the beginning if you want. The profound simplicity of the statement squeezed Eleanor's heart. In the 4 years since noticing the quiet girl who haunted the library stacks, she'd never heard Lily express her feelings so directly. That's very true, Eleanor said. Books are reliable that way. They're always waiting for us, exactly as we left them. Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with this understanding between them. She reached for her backpack, the same yellow one, now sporting a safety pin where the zipper had partially separated from the fabric, and carefully extracted a paper bag. I brought lunch, she explained, opening the bag to reveal a somewhat squashed peanut butter sandwich and an apple. Is it okay if I eat here? I'll be very careful with the books. Of course, Eleanor said, noting the meager meal. Actually, we just got a donation of snacks for our after-school program. Would you like some crackers and juice to go with your sandwich? We have more than we can use. A flicker of something, relief? Gratitude? Crossed Lily's face before she controlled her expression. Yes, please. If you really have extra. Absolutely. Wait here. Eleanor walked quickly to the staff room, where boxes of donated snacks were stacked against one wall. She selected an individual package of cheese crackers, a small juice box, and, after a moment's hesitation, added a granola bar and an individually wrapped chocolate chip cookie. When she returned, Lily was carefully spreading her lunch on a napkin, the sandwich positioned precisely in the center. Here you go, Eleanor said, setting the additional items down. We also have these if you'd like them. Lily's eyes widened slightly at the bounty. Thank you, she said, reaching first for the juice box. Eleanor noticed how she took small, measured sips, as if making it last. I'm going to have my lunch too, Eleanor said, pulling up a child-sized chair. Do you mind if I join you? Lily shook her head, and Eleanor retrieved her brown bag lunch from behind the circulation desk. A turkey sandwich, carrot sticks, and an orange. As they ate in companionable silence, Eleanor observed how Lily methodically consumed half of each item, then carefully wrapped the remainder and returned it to her paper bag. "Saving the rest for later?" Eleanor asked casually. "For tomorrow," Lily replied. "Dad sometimes forgets to go shopping on weekends." The statement, delivered without self-pity or complaint, merely as fact, sent a warning bell ringing through Eleanor's mind. She thought of her earlier conversation with Tom about documenting concerning signs, and mentally added this one to her growing list. "You know," Eleanor said, finishing her carrot sticks, "we always have those extra snacks. Feel free to take some home if you'd like. They'll just go stale otherwise." Lily looked up, her green eyes calculating, assessing whether this was genuine offer or pity. "Really? Really? In fact, you'd be doing us a favor. Tom complains about them taking up space in the break room." After lunch, Eleanor had duties at the circulation desk, but she kept Lily in her peripheral vision. The girl moved from the reading nook to a table where she spread out her backpack contents, folders of schoolwork, a pencil case with several broken colored pencils carefully sharpened to extend their usefulness, and a worn spiral notebook filled with what appeared to be notes about books she'd read. Mid-afternoon, Tom approached Eleanor at the desk, his voice low. "Your little shadow is at it again," he said, nodding toward the water fountain where Lily was filling a plastic water bottle. "She has a name, Tom." I know. Lily." He adjusted his glasses. "Did you notice she's wearing the same clothes from Wednesday?" Eleanor nodded. "She rotates between 3 outfits. I've been keeping track." Tom raised an eyebrow. "That's a bit systematic of you." "Something's not right with her home situation," Eleanor said, keeping her voice down as Lily returned to her table. "She mentioned today that her father forgets to go grocery shopping. She's rationing a peanut butter sandwich to last through tomorrow." Tom's expression sobered. That could be neglect or it could be financial hardship. Lots of families struggling these days. "It's more than that," Eleanor insisted. "She never mentions friends or activities. She flinches at sudden movements. She spends every possible moment here rather than at home." "Have you considered calling Child Protective Services?" Tom asked, straightening a stack of hold slips. Eleanor sighed. "Without something more concrete, what would I report? This child loves the library too much? Her clothes are worn but clean? They're overloaded with cases of clear abuse." "Fair point." Tom glanced at his watch. "But if you're really concerned, you might want to document what you're observing. Dates, specific behaviors, things she says. Build a case for if, when you need to make that call." Eleanor nodded. "I've started. I just wish—" She broke off as Lily approached the desk, the mythology book in hand. "May I check this out too?" the girl asked. "Of course," Eleanor smiled, taking the book. "Did you finish it already?" "Not yet, but I want to read more at home." She paused, fidgeting slightly with her library card before adding, "I like the story about Orpheus and Eurydice too, even though it's sad." "Another story about the underworld," Eleanor noted, scanning the book. "What interested you about that one?" "How Orpheus almost rescued Eurydice, but then looked back at the last minute and lost her forever," Lily said. "I think sometimes people make mistakes even when they're trying their hardest to do the right thing." The observation, so adult in its understanding of human fallibility, caught both Eleanor and Tom off guard. They exchanged a quick glance as Eleanor handed the book back to Lily. "That's very insightful," she said. "Even adults struggle with that idea." Lily slipped the book into her backpack alongside the half-eaten lunch and extra snacks Eleanor had provided. "My dad says he makes mistakes a lot," she said, her voice matter-of-fact, "especially after he drinks his special soda." Before Eleanor could formulate a response to this revealing statement, Lily had zipped her backpack and was already moving toward the reading nook again. Tom let out a low whistle. "Special soda, huh? That's a new euphemism." "It confirms what I suspected," Eleanor said, her concern deepening. "Drinking? Possibly unemployment or underemployment. A child who's learned to fend for herself and make excuses for adult behavior." Tom nodded slowly. "Document it. All of it." The afternoon progressed quietly. A light rain began tapping against the windows, turning the library into an even cozier refuge against the November chill. The usual Saturday patrons drifted in and out, elderly men reading newspapers, college students working on assignments, young families attending children's programs. Through it all, Lily remained constant, moving between activities but never suggesting she might leave before closing time. At 4 o'clock, Eleanor gathered the remaining children for the afternoon story hour. To her surprise, Lily approached the circle and sat at its edge, still separate but closer than she'd ever positioned herself before. "Today we're going to read a special book," Eleanor announced, holding up a copy with a young girl on the cover. "It's called Matilda by Roald Dahl. It's about a very smart girl who loves to read and has to deal with some difficult grown-ups in her life." She noticed Lily lean forward slightly, her interest visibly piqued. As Eleanor read the first chapters, describing Matilda's negligent parents and her solace in books, she occasionally glanced at Lily. The girl sat perfectly still, her eyes wide and focused, her lips sometimes moving silently with certain passages, as if the words were speaking directly to her experience. When Eleanor reached the part where Matilda visits the public library for the first time and discovers she can escape into books, she saw Lily's eyes grow bright with unshed tears. The girl quickly ducked her head, using her sleeve to wipe her face when she thought no one was looking. These books gave Matilda a hopeful and comforting message. "You are not alone," Eleanor read, feeling the weight of the words in a way she never had before. After story time, as the other children dispersed, Lily lingered near Eleanor. "Do you have more of that book?" she asked quietly. "I do," Eleanor said. "Would you like to borrow it?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Yes, please. I want to know what happens to Matilda. She's quite a remarkable character," Eleanor said, retrieving a copy from the shelf. "Very brave and resourceful in difficult circumstances." "Like Persephone," Lily offered. "In some ways, yes," Eleanor agreed, touched by the connection the girl had made between such different stories. Although Matilda finds ways to change her circumstances rather than just enduring them. As Eleanor checked out the book, she made a decision. "Lily, I know you usually stay until closing time, but it's supposed to rain heavily later. Would you like me to call your father to pick you up earlier today?" A shadow crossed Lily's face. "He's working," she said, the rehearsed quality returning to her voice. "He won't be home until after dark anyway." "I see. And there's no one else who could come get you? No neighbor or family friend?" Lily shook her head. "It's just me and Dad. I can walk home like always. I don't mind the rain." "All right," Eleanor conceded, making another mental note. Single parent, apparently no support system, child routinely left alone. "But take my umbrella again just in case." The weather report said the rain might get worse later. The hours ticked by, the library gradually emptying as the afternoon waned. Outside, the gentle rain had indeed intensified, driven now by gusts of wind that occasionally rattled the tall windows. At 5:30, as Eleanor began her closing routine, Lily remained absorbed in Matilda, seemingly oblivious to the deteriorating weather. "Lily," Eleanor called softly, approaching the reading nook, "we'll be closing soon. I think you should head home before this rain gets any worse." The girl looked up reluctantly, then glanced toward the windows where darkness had already fallen. For the first time, Eleanor saw genuine anxiety cross her face. Lily began, then stopped. "Okay." As she gathered her belongings, Eleanor noticed the girl moving more slowly than usual, as if delaying the inevitable departure. A sudden, alarming thought occurred to her. "Lily, is everything okay at home?" she asked directly, kneeling to the girl's level. "You know you can tell me if something's wrong, don't you?" Lily's hands stilled on her backpack zipper. For a moment, her careful composure wavered, and Eleanor caught a glimpse of something raw and vulnerable beneath. "Dad had a bad night yesterday," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "He broke some things, but it's okay. He always says sorry after." Eleanor fought to keep her expression neutral despite the alarm bells now clanging in her mind. "Broke things? Like what?" Lily shrugged one shoulder, not meeting Eleanor's eyes. Just some dishes and a picture frame. He cleaned it up this morning before he went to work. Were you scared when that happened? Eleanor asked gently. No, Lily said too quickly. Then more quietly, maybe a little, but it's okay when he sleeps after. That's when I read under my blanket with a flashlight. Eleanor took a deep breath, choosing her next words carefully. Lily, sometimes grown-ups have problems they need help with, problems they can't solve on their own. Your dad might be one of those grown-ups. Lily's head snapped up, fear flashing across her face. You can't tell anyone, she said urgently. He says if I tell anyone about the bad nights, people might take me away. I don't want to go away. Who would help him if I wasn't there? The response hit Eleanor like a physical blow. The role reversal so complete that this 8-year-old girl saw herself as responsible for her father's welfare rather than the other way around. Lily, it's not your job to take care of your dad, she said softly. It's his job to take care of you. But we take care of each other, Lily insisted, that rehearsed quality returning. That's what family does. He just gets sad about mom sometimes, and then he drinks the special soda that makes him forget to be sad for a while. Before Eleanor could respond, Tom appeared at the end of the aisle. 5 minutes to closing, he announced, then paused, sensing the tension. Everything okay here? The interruption broke the moment. Lily quickly zipped her backpack and stood, shouldering it with practiced ease. I'm leaving now, she said. Thank you for the book and the snacks, Ms. Walsh. Wait, Lily, Eleanor began, but the girl was already heading toward the exit, moving with uncharacteristic haste. Did I interrupt something? Tom asked as Eleanor stood, watching Lily retrieve the borrowed umbrella from the stand near the door. She just told me her father broke things during a bad night yesterday, Eleanor said quietly. She's afraid of being taken away from him. Classic signs of a child protecting an abusive parent. Tom's expression grew serious. That's more concrete than worn clothes and missed meals. You should. I know. Eleanor cut him off, watching as Lily pushed through the heavy glass doors into the rainy darkness. I need to report it, but I also need more information first. The system isn't always kind to children, Tom. I don't want to make her situation worse by rushing in without understanding it fully. Through the windows, they watched Lily struggle to open the umbrella against the wind, her small figure momentarily illuminated by the library's exterior lights before she stepped beyond their reach into the rain-swept evening. She shouldn't be walking home alone in this, Eleanor murmured, a decision crystallizing in her mind. I'm going to follow her, just to make sure she gets home safely, and to see what this home situation actually looks like. Ellie, that's crossing a line, Tom warned, though his tone lacked conviction. Maybe, Eleanor conceded, already moving toward the staff room to retrieve her coat and car keys. But sometimes lines need to be crossed when a child's welfare is at stake. As she drove through the rain-slick streets 15 minutes later, keeping a careful distance behind the small figure with the oversized umbrella, Eleanor reflected on the invisible boundaries that separated professional obligation from human responsibility. In 15 years as a librarian, she had never followed a patron home or inserted herself into their personal lives. But then, she had never encountered a child like Lily before, a girl whose quiet resilience both inspired and disturbed her, whose careful self-containment spoke of lessons learned too young, whose relationship with books mirrored Eleanor's own childhood escape from a home dominated by her father's alcoholism. Just to make sure she's safe, Eleanor whispered to herself as Lily turned onto Pine Street, the umbrella bobbing like a red sail against the gathering darkness. Just this once. What Eleanor couldn't anticipate, as she slowed her car to maintain her discreet distance, was how this single decision, made from concern and professional diligence, would irrevocably alter both their lives, connecting their stories across the boundaries that separated adult from child, professional from personal, observer from participant in the unfolding drama of a family in crisis. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the November downpour as Eleanor followed Lily's small figure from a discreet distance. The red umbrella bobbed along the darkened sidewalk, occasionally tilting against gusts of wind that threatened to wrench it from the girl's grasp. Eleanor's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her conscience wrestling with what she was doing even as her concern for Lily propelled her forward. "This is crossing a line," she murmured to herself, echoing Tom's warning. Yet she couldn't shake the image of Lily's face when she'd mentioned her father's bad night. That momentary crack in the careful composure, revealing something raw and frightened beneath. Lily walked with purpose, navigating the wet streets with the confidence of someone following a well-worn path. She turned onto Maple Avenue, then left onto Birch Street, an area of town that had seen better days. Once cheerful family homes now showed signs of economic struggle. Peeling paint, sagging porches, cars well past their prime parked in cracked driveways. When Lily turned onto Cedar Lane, Eleanor slowed her car even further. The street was lined with duplexes built in the 1970s, their brick facades darkened by decades of weather. Most had small front yards separated by chain-link fences, some decorated with weather-worn plastic toys or seasonal flags, others bare except for patchy grass and the occasional forgotten bicycle. Halfway down the block, Lily stopped in front of a duplex with a crooked mailbox and dead mums still sitting in planters on either side of the concrete steps. Number 247 was barely visible on the door, the metal floor hanging sideways. Eleanor pulled over about 50 yards away, keeping her headlights off but leaving the engine running. From this distance, she could observe without being immediately noticeable. What happened next surprised her. Instead of going inside, Lily closed the umbrella and sat down on the top step, her backpack beside her. Despite the rain, which had lessened to a steady drizzle, the girl made no move to enter the house. Eleanor checked the time on her dashboard. 6:22 p.m. The duplex remained dark, no lights visible through any of the front windows. 10 minutes passed. 15. 20. Lily remained on the step, occasionally wiping rain from her face but otherwise motionless. Eleanor's concern deepened with each passing minute. Was the girl locked out? Why would she sit in the rain rather than go inside? At 6:47, headlights swept the street as a pickup truck pulled into the driveway of the duplex. Almost immediately, lights came on inside the house. Lily stood quickly, gathering her backpack and umbrella, and only then moved toward the door. She seemed to be timing her arrival to coincide precisely with someone else's return. Eleanor watched as Lily disappeared inside. For several minutes, nothing was visible except the warm glow of lights through thin curtains. She debated driving away. She had confirmed Lily had reached home safely, after all. But something kept her sitting there, engine idling, wipers sweeping back and forth across her windshield in a hypnotic rhythm. Then she saw it, shadows moving behind the curtains. One large, one small. The larger shadow seemed to be gesturing, moving erratically. Even through the rain-streaked windshield, Eleanor could tell the movements were agitated. She saw the smaller shadow, Lily, standing perfectly still, head slightly bowed. The posture spoke of a child accustomed to weathering storms, to making herself small and unnoticeable. When the larger shadow suddenly raised an arm, Eleanor inhaled sharply, her body tensing. But instead of striking, the figure seemed to be pointing, gesturing toward another part of the house. The smaller shadow disappeared from view, while the larger one moved in the opposite direction. Eleanor released her breath slowly, unclenching hands she hadn't realized she'd tightened on the steering wheel. What had she just witnessed? A normal parent-child interaction, perhaps amplified by her own suspicions? Or something more sinister, the prelude to the bad nights Lily had mentioned? She waited another 15 minutes, but no more shadows appeared at the front window. Finally, with the rain intensifying again and no further evidence to gather, Eleanor put her car in drive and pulled away from the curb. As she drove home through streets slick with rain, her mind worked over what she had seen, trying to interpret the scene framed by that lit window. Perhaps Daniel Pearson had simply been directing his daughter to do homework or take a bath, normal parental instructions delivered with emphasis after a long day. But the way Lily had waited outside until his arrival, the rigid stillness of her posture during what appeared to be a one-sided confrontation, these details nagged at Eleanor, refusing easy dismissal. By the time she reached her apartment, She had decided on her next steps. Continue documenting her observations, try to learn more about Daniel Pearson, and most importantly, maintain her growing connection with Lily. The girl had already begun to trust her, sharing small but significant details about her home life. With patience, Eleanor might earn enough trust to determine whether intervention was truly needed. One step at a time, she told herself as she unlocked her apartment door, greeted by Dickens weaving between her ankles with impatient meows. Just be there for her consistently, and eventually she'll let you help. You followed her home? Tom's voice rose in disbelief, drawing glances from two volunteers shelving books nearby. It was Monday morning, and Eleanor had just finished recounting Saturday's events. Keep your voice down, Eleanor hissed, pulling him into the staff room where a half-empty pot of coffee sat on the warmer. Yes, I followed her, and I'm glad I did. Tom ran a hand through his thinning hair. Ellie, that's crossing a line. I know, you've made that clear. She poured herself a cup of coffee, needing the caffeine after a weekend of troubled sleep. But something is definitely wrong in that house, Tom. You should have seen how she sat outside in the rain for 20 minutes, waiting for her father to come home before she would go in. What child does that unless they're afraid to be alone with someone? Tom sighed, his initial outrage softening. Did you see anything definitive? Anything we could report? Eleanor shook her head, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Not exactly, but the body language, Tom. The way he was gesturing angrily while she just stood there, completely still, it reminded me of my own father when he'd been drinking. Tom's expression shifted at this rare reference to Eleanor's childhood. I didn't know your father had a drinking problem. He didn't call it a problem, Eleanor said wryly. He called it unwinding or taking the edge off. But my mother and I knew to make ourselves scarce when he started unwinding after work. I'm sorry, Ellie, Tom said quietly, but that's exactly why you need to be careful here. Your own history might be coloring how you see this situation. Or it might be helping me recognize something others would miss, she countered. Either way, I'm not making any hasty moves. I'm just going to keep building trust with Lily, document what I observe, and try to figure out what's really happening in that house. Tom looked unconvinced but nodded. All right, but promise me you won't do anything impulsive. Define impulsive, Eleanor said with a half-smile. You know exactly what I mean, Tom replied, not returning the smile. No more following patrons home. No confronting parents you suspect of wrongdoing. No playing amateur detective or social worker. Fine, Eleanor conceded. I promise to stay within professional boundaries. Mostly. Tom rolled his eyes but seemed satisfied. That's as good as I'm going to get from you, isn't it? Before Eleanor could respond, the front door chimes sounded, announcing the library's opening. They moved to their respective posts, Tom to the reference desk, Eleanor to circulation, and the conversation was temporarily shelved along with their concerns. The morning passed in its usual rhythm of returning books, answering questions, and assisting patrons. Eleanor kept glancing at the entrance, expecting to see Lily arrive after school as she usually did. But by 4 o'clock, there was still no sign of the girl. Maybe she's sick, Tom suggested during a lull. It is that time of year. Maybe, Eleanor agreed, though the knot of worry in her stomach tightened. She thought of Lily sitting in the rain, of the angry gestures behind the curtained window. Or maybe something happened after I left Saturday night. Tuesday came and went with no appearance from Lily. On Wednesday, Eleanor called Pine Street Elementary during her lunch break, identifying herself as the head librarian. I'm checking on a student who participates in our after-school reading program, she explained to the secretary. Lily Pearson. She hasn't been in this week, and I wanted to make sure she's all right. Let me check, the secretary said. Eleanor heard the clicking of computer keys in the background. Yes, Lily has been absent Monday and Tuesday. Her father called to say she has a bad cold. I see. Thank you. Eleanor hung up, both relieved to have an explanation and troubled by its potential implications. A cold could certainly keep a child home from school, But given what she knew of Lily's determination to reach the library each day, it would have to be quite severe to keep her away for 3 days straight. By Saturday morning, with still no sign of Lily, Eleanor's worry had morphed into genuine alarm. Using the contact information from Lily's library card application, she tried calling the Pearson home phone. The number was disconnected. "That's it," she told Tom as they prepared for the weekend rush. "After closing today, I'm driving by their house. Something's not right." After following her home, making inquiries at her school, and now planning a drive-by, "Don't you think you're getting a little obsessed?" Tom asked carefully. Eleanor bristled. "It's not obsession, it's concern. This isn't just any child, Tom. This is a girl who hasn't missed a single day at the library in months, who suddenly disappears after I witness what looked like an intimidating interaction with her father. What if she's hurt? What if her cold is actually a broken arm or worse?" Tom held up his hands in a placating gesture. All right, but take me with you this time. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. And frankly, I'm getting worried about both of you at this point." Eleanor's irritation dissolved into gratitude. "Thank you. I could use the company, actually." The day dragged on interminably. Eleanor found herself checking the door every few minutes, hoping to see Lily walk in with her battered yellow backpack and serious green eyes. By closing time, with no appearance from the girl, her anxiety had reached a fever pitch. "Ready?" Tom asked as they walked to the parking lot together, collars turned up against the November chill. Eleanor nodded, keys already in hand. "We'll take my car." They drove in tense silence through streets made unfamiliar by early evening darkness. When they reached Cedar Lane, Eleanor slowed, scanning the numbers until she spotted 247. "That's it," she said, pulling to the curb across the street and several houses down. The duplex with the crooked mailbox. Unlike her previous visit, tonight the house was completely dark. No lights shone from any window, no car sat in the driveway. The place had an unmistakable air of emptiness. "Are you sure this is where she lives?" Tom asked, peering through the passenger window. "Positive. I watched her go in last Saturday." Eleanor frowned, studying the darkened building. "Maybe they're out for the evening? At 8 o'clock on a Saturday with a sick child?" Tom sounded skeptical. "Let's wait a few minutes, see if anyone comes home." They sat in silence, watching the house. After 15 minutes with no change, Eleanor made a decision. "I'm going to knock," she announced, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Whoa, hold on," Tom protested. "That's definitely crossing a line." "I'll say I'm returning a book she left at the library," Eleanor said, already opening her door. "It's not unreasonable for a librarian to do that." "Except you don't have a book to return," Tom pointed out. Eleanor paused, then reached into the back seat where she kept a canvas bag of children's books for her niece's occasional visits. "Now I do," she said, selecting a volume she thought Lily might enjoy. Tom sighed but unbuckled his seatbelt. "I'm coming with you." They approached the duplex together, footsteps sounding unnaturally loud on the quiet street. Up close, the signs of neglect were more apparent. Gutters sagging, paint peeling around window frames, a crack running through one concrete step. Eleanor knocked firmly on the door, then waited. No sound came from within. She knocked again, louder this time. The porch light on the adjoining unit suddenly flicked on, and its door opened to reveal an elderly woman with wiry gray hair and a cardigan wrapped tightly around her thin frame. "They're not home," she called out, squinting at Eleanor and Tom. "Haven't been since Tuesday." Eleanor turned, surprised. "Do you know where they went?" The woman stepped onto her own small porch, curiosity evidently overcoming caution. "Who's asking?" "I'm Eleanor Walsh, the head librarian at Oakwood Public Library," Eleanor explained, approaching the dividing railing. "Lily Pearson is one of our regular patrons. She hasn't been in all week, and I was concerned." The neighbor's expression softened at the mention of Lily. "Poor little thing. Quiet as a mouse. Always polite when I see her. Not like her father." She sniffed disapprovingly. "He loaded up his truck Tuesday night, making a racket at all hours. I heard him telling the girl they were going to stay with his brother for a while, till he figured some things out. That's what he said. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Tom. Did Lily seem okay when they left? The woman hesitated, her lined face creasing further in thought. Hard to say in the dark. She was walking on her own, carrying that yellow backpack of hers. Didn't seem hurt, if that's what you're asking. Relief flooded through Eleanor, immediately followed by a new concern. Did they say when they'd be back? Didn't say anything to me directly. I just overheard from my window. The woman pulled her cardigan tighter. But the landlord was by yesterday. Said Daniel hadn't paid rent in 3 months. Left owing utilities too, from what I gathered. I don't think they're coming back, to be honest. The implications settled heavily on Eleanor. If the Pearsons had moved away permanently, she might never know what had happened to Lily. The thought of the solemn-eyed girl disappearing from her life without warning created a physical ache in her chest. Do you know where his brother lives? She asked, fighting to keep her voice casual. The neighbor shook her head. Never mentioned family before. Daniel kept to himself mostly, except when he'd been drinking. Then the whole neighborhood could hear him. Thank you for your help, Eleanor said, aware they had gleaned all the information this woman could provide. If they do come back, or if you hear anything about where they've gone, would you mind calling the library? She fumbled in her bag for a business card. The woman accepted it with a small nod. For the girl's sake, I will. Always thought someone should be keeping an eye on that situation. What now? Tom asked as they walked back to the car. Eleanor stared at the darkened duplex, trying to process this unexpected development. I don't know, she admitted. If they've truly moved away, then maybe it's for the best, Tom suggested gently. A fresh start somewhere else might be exactly what they need. Or it might be the same problems in a new location, Eleanor countered. Alcoholism and abuse don't disappear with a change of address, Tom. He had no answer for that, and they drove back to the library parking lot where Tom had left his car in contemplative silence. I'll see you Monday, he said as he climbed out. Try not to worry too much, Ellie. Kids are resilient. But as Eleanor drove home alone, she couldn't shake the image of Lily sitting in the rain, waiting for her father to arrive before daring to enter her own home. Nor could she forget the way the girl's eyes had lit up when reading about Matilda, another child navigating a difficult home life with intelligence and quiet determination. Where are you, Lily? She whispered to her empty car. And are you safe? The following week passed in a blur of routine library tasks that felt oddly hollow without Lily's presence. Eleanor found herself automatically glancing toward the reading nook at closing time, half expecting to see the girl absorbed in a book, reluctant to leave. Each time the front door chimed, she looked up, hoping to see a small figure with a yellow backpack. You need to let this go, Tom advised on Friday afternoon as he caught her checking the door again. It's been almost 2 weeks. They've moved away, Ellie. I know, she sighed. It's just unfinished. I feel like I failed her somehow. You didn't fail anyone, Tom insisted. You noticed a potentially troubled child, you built a connection with her, you offered support in the ways you could. That's more than most people would do. Eleanor nodded, knowing he was right but unable to shake the feeling that she should have done more, acted sooner, pushed harder for information that might have helped Lily. Saturday morning brought an unexpected development. Eleanor was helping a patron locate gardening books when Tom appeared at her elbow, his expression uncharacteristically animated. She's here, he whispered urgently. Eleanor's heart jumped. Lily. Tom nodded, gesturing toward the children's section. Just came in. Looks tired, but otherwise okay. Eleanor forced herself to finish assisting the patron before making her way toward the reading area, trying to temper her eagerness to avoid overwhelming Lily. When she rounded the corner, she spotted the girl immediately, sitting in her usual spot in the reading nook, a copy of Matilda open on her lap, the same one she checked out 2 weeks earlier. Lily, Eleanor said softly, approaching slowly. The girl looked up, and Eleanor had to suppress a gasp. Lily's face was thinner than before, with dark shadows beneath her eyes that gave her a haunted appearance. but it was the yellowing bruise on her left cheekbone that caused Eleanor's stomach to clench. "Hi, Ms. Walsh," Lily said, her voice slightly raspy. "I brought your book back. I'm sorry it's late." Eleanor sat down beside her, careful to maintain some distance. "Don't worry about that. I'm just glad to see you again. We were concerned when you stopped coming to the library. We had to go stay with my uncle for a while," Lily explained, her fingers nervously tracing the book's spine. "In Bristol. But we came back yesterday." "I see," Eleanor said carefully. "Your neighbor mentioned you might be away for some time." "Dad worked things out with the landlord," Lily said, the rehearsed quality returning to her voice. "We can stay in our house now." "That's good news." Eleanor paused, then gently asked, "Lily, what happened to your face?" The girl's hand flew to her cheek, as if she'd forgotten the bruise was visible. "I fell," she said quickly, "at Uncle Rob's house. They have stairs, and I'm not used to stairs." The explanation might have been plausible if not for the practiced way she delivered it, and the way her eyes slid away from Eleanor's as she spoke. "I see," Eleanor said again, deciding not to press further right now. "Well, I'm very glad you're back. The library hasn't been the same without you." A small, genuine smile flickered across Lily's face. "I missed it here. Uncle Rob doesn't have many books, and they don't let kids get library cards unless their parents live in the town." "Well, you're always welcome here," Eleanor assured her. "Have you had breakfast today? We have some muffins in the staff room from a morning meeting." Lily's eyes brightened at the mention of food. "No, I haven't. Dad was still sleeping when I left." The casual confirmation that an 8-year-old had made her way to the library alone, without breakfast, while her father slept, sent another wave of concern through Eleanor. "Let me get you something," she said, standing. "And maybe some hot chocolate? It's getting quite cold out there." While retrieving the promised food, Eleanor's mind raced with the implications of Lily's return. The bruise, the weight loss, the exhaustion evident in her young face, all pointed to a situation that had deteriorated rather than improved during their absence. The mention of Daniel sleeping late on a Saturday morning suggested his drinking hadn't abated either. "Here you go," she said, returning with a blueberry muffin, an apple, and a paper cup of hot chocolate. She'd added extra marshmallows, remembering how Lily had once mentioned they were a rare treat. Lily accepted the food with solemn gratitude. "Thank you, Ms. Walsh." "You're welcome." Eleanor sat again, watching as the girl carefully broke the muffin into small pieces, eating slowly as if to make it last. "Lily, I want you to know something important. If you ever need help, any kind of help, you can tell me. Even if it's something scary or something you think you're not supposed to talk about. Okay?" Lily looked up, her green eyes searching Eleanor's face with an adult's assessment. After a long moment, she nodded slightly. "And if you ever feel unsafe or afraid at home, the library is always a place you can come," Eleanor continued, choosing her words carefully. "There are people whose job it is to help children who might be in difficult situations. People who could make things better, safer." Lily's expression closed immediately. "I'm fine," she said, the rehearsed quality returning stronger than ever. "Dad takes care of me. He just gets sad sometimes about Mom. It's not his fault." The defensive response confirmed Eleanor's suspicions even as it demonstrated the depth of Lily's loyalty to her father. Despite everything, the girl was still protecting him, still making excuses for behavior that had likely resulted in the bruise she now bore. "I understand," Eleanor said gently. "Just remember what I said. Okay? Everyone needs help sometimes. Even grown-ups." Lily nodded noncommittally and returned her attention to the muffin, effectively ending the conversation. Eleanor didn't push further, recognizing the delicate balance between offering support and frightening the girl into complete withdrawal. For the remainder of the day, Lily stayed in the library, moving between different reading areas but always within Eleanor's sight. She accepted the lunch Eleanor offered, a sandwich from the cafe next door, with the same careful gratitude she showed for everything, and continued reading through a stack of books as if making up for the 2 weeks she'd been deprived of them. As closing time approached, Eleanor's anxiety grew. The thought of Lily returning to the house on Cedar Lane, to Daniel Pearson's volatile moods and bad nights, made her physically ill. Yet she had no legal grounds to prevent it, no concrete evidence of abuse that would justify immediate intervention. "Time to go, Lily," she said reluctantly at 6 o'clock. To her surprise, Lily didn't exhibit her usual reluctance to leave. Instead, she carefully returned her books to the proper shelves, packed her backpack with methodical precision, and zipped her coat without protest. "Thank you for the food and the hot chocolate," she said politely, "and for not being mad about the late book." "You're always welcome here," Eleanor repeated. "Will you be back tomorrow?" "If I can," Lily said, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "It depends on if Dad needs help with things at home." The simple statement, delivered without complaint or drama, reinforced the role reversal that so troubled Eleanor. A child worried about attending to a parent's needs rather than a parent ensuring a child's well-being. "Well, I hope to see you," Eleanor said, walking Lily to the door. "And remember, if you need anything at all, you can come to me." Lily nodded, her serious face momentarily softening. "I know." She hesitated at the threshold, looking up at Eleanor with an expression that seemed to hold words unspoken, then turned and walked into the early evening darkness. Eleanor watched her go, the familiar sense of helplessness returning as the small figure disappeared around the corner. Despite her promises of support, despite her professional knowledge and personal concern, she remained fundamentally powerless to intervene in what she increasingly suspected was a dangerous situation. Unless and until Lily chose to confide in her, or until she witnessed something that constituted clear evidence of abuse, Eleanor could only watch, wait, and worry, caught in the limbo of knowing something was wrong but lacking the authority to make it right. "Come back tomorrow," she whispered to the empty doorway. "Please come back." Lily did return the next day, arriving just as the library opened at noon. Eleanor fought to conceal her relief when the girl walked through the door, her yellow backpack slung over one shoulder. "Good morning," she greeted Lily warmly. "You're bright and early today." "Dad has to work," Lily explained, removing her coat to reveal the green sweater beneath, now sporting a small tear at the collar that hadn't been there before. "He said I could stay here until he's done." "You're welcome as long as you'd like," Eleanor assured her. "Have you had breakfast?" A slight hesitation. "Sort of. We didn't have much food at home." Eleanor nodded, keeping her expression neutral despite the anger flaring within. A parent who could afford alcohol but not food for his child represented a particular kind of negligence that struck at her core. "Well, I happen to have brought extra today," she said lightly. "Let me get you something." Throughout the day, Eleanor kept Lily in her peripheral vision while attending to her regular duties. The girl moved between activities, reading, drawing in her notebook, organizing and reorganizing her backpack contents, with the self-contained focus that had always characterized her library visits. But now, with the context Eleanor had gleaned, that independence seemed less a personality trait and more a necessary adaptation to neglect. At 3 o'clock, just as Eleanor was preparing for the afternoon children's program, the front door chimed. A man entered, his movements carrying a barely controlled energy that immediately drew attention. Tall and lanky, with dark hair similar to Lily's and a 2-day stubble on his jaw, he scanned the library with restless eyes. Eleanor knew immediately who he was. "Can I help you?" she asked, approaching with professional courtesy that belied her internal alarm. "Looking for my daughter," he said, his voice carrying a slight rasp. "Lily. She's supposed to be here." "Yes, she's in the children's section," Eleanor confirmed, maintaining her calm demeanor despite the faint smell of alcohol she detected on his breath. It was barely 3 in the afternoon. "Would you like me to get her for you?" "Nah, I'll find her." He moved past Eleanor, his gait not quite steady. Eleanor followed at a discreet distance, watching as he approached the reading nook where Lily sat with a picture book. The girl looked up, and Eleanor saw a flash of something. Not joy, not fear exactly, but a wary alertness cross her face. "Dad," she said, quickly closing her book and standing. "You're done with work already?" Daniel Pearson glanced around the children's area with obvious discomfort. A man clearly out of place among the bright colors and small furniture. Got off early. Come on, we're going. Lily immediately began gathering her things, moving with the efficient haste of someone accustomed to responding quickly to commands. Okay, I just need to put this book back. Leave it, he said impatiently. They've got people for that. Actually, Eleanor interjected smoothly, stepping forward. We encourage our young patrons to return books to their proper places. It's part of learning library responsibility. Daniel turned, seeming to fully register Eleanor for the first time. His eyes, the same green as Lily's but clouded with something Eleanor recognized all too well, narrowed slightly. You the librarian? He asked. Eleanor Walsh, she confirmed, extending her hand with a professional smile. Head librarian. Lily is one of our most dedicated patrons. He ignored her offered hand. Yeah, she's always got her nose in a book. Takes after her mother that way. A shadow crossed his face. Never understood the appeal myself. Lily has excellent reading comprehension for her age, Eleanor continued, determined to establish a connection. She's working well above grade level in her selections. That right? He glanced at his daughter with an expression that might have been pride or merely impatience. Smart kid. Gets that from her mom too. Lily had finished returning her book and stood waiting, backpack on, coat buttoned, her posture attentive yet somehow diminished in her father's presence. The contrast between the self-possessed girl, who navigated the library independently, and this watchful child awaiting directions struck Eleanor forcefully. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Pearson, Eleanor said. Perhaps next time you're here we could talk about some reading programs that might benefit Lily. We have several initiatives for gifted readers. Sure, whatever, he replied dismissively. Come on, Lily. Gotta stop at the store on the way home. As they turned to leave, Eleanor made a quick decision. Lily, she called, don't forget to take some books home. You mentioned wanting to finish Matilda. The girl hesitated, glancing at her father. Go ahead, Daniel said with a shrug. Just make it quick. While Lily selected books, Eleanor seized the opportunity to speak to Daniel without his daughter present. Mr. Pearson, I wanted to let you know what a pleasure it is having Lily here. She's welcome anytime, including for our after-school programs that provide snacks and supervised activities until 6. Yeah, she mentioned those, he said, eyes tracking his daughter's movements rather than meeting Eleanor's gaze. Good to have somewhere she can go when I'm working. Not so easy since her mom died. I can imagine, Eleanor said carefully. How long has it been? 3 years in February. His expression hardened. Had cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to gone. Left me with a 5-year-old and medical bills I'm still paying off. The information provided context Eleanor hadn't fully grasped before. Financial strain on top of single parenthood and grief. A devastating combination that might explain, if not excuse, some of what she'd observed. I'm very sorry for your loss, she said sincerely. That must have been incredibly difficult for both of you. Something in her tone seemed to reach him, and for a moment, his defensive posture softened. Yeah, well, we manage. He glanced toward Lily again, a complex emotion crossing his face. She's a good kid. Doesn't give me trouble. She's quite remarkable, Eleanor agreed. Very self-sufficient for her age. Has to be, he said, and there was a note of what might have been regret in his voice. I work weird hours. Construction, bartending, whatever I can get. Not always around when she needs something. Before Eleanor could respond, Lily returned with 3 books clutched to her chest. I'm ready, Dad. Daniel nodded, his momentary openness disappearing as quickly as it had emerged. Let's go then. Bye, Ms. Walsh, Lily said, her voice carrying its usual careful politeness. Thank you for letting me stay today. Anytime, Lily, Eleanor replied warmly. See you tomorrow? The girl glanced quickly at her father before answering. If I can. Eleanor watched them leave, Daniel's hand resting briefly on Lily's shoulder as they exited. A gesture that could be read as either affectionate or controlling, depending on one's perspective. The encounter had left her with mixed impressions. Daniel Pearson was clearly drinking during the day, which aligned with her concerns about alcoholism, yet he'd also shown glimmers of awareness about his daughter's needs and his own limitations. The bruise on Lily's cheek remained unexplained, the tension in the girl's body when her father arrived undeniable. Yet there had been no overt hostility, no obvious signs of the volatility Eleanor had glimpsed through the window that rainy night. As she returned to her duties, Eleanor's mind turned over the conversation, examining it from all angles. Daniel Pearson was a man drowning in circumstances beyond his control, grief, financial hardship, single parenthood, and using alcohol as a life raft that was, in reality, only pulling him further under. His love for his daughter seemed genuine, if damaged by his own struggles. The question that Eleanor couldn't answer was whether that damaged love was nevertheless enough to ensure Lily's safety, or whether it had already warped into something dangerous, the bad nights and broken things that had left a visible mark on the child's face and an invisible one on her spirit. She thought of her promise to Tom, no amateur detective work, no crossing professional boundaries. Yet she couldn't shake the sense that Lily was balancing on a precarious edge, and that the wrong push in either direction might result in irreparable harm. One day at a time, Eleanor murmured to herself, echoing the mantra her mother had repeated throughout her own childhood with an alcoholic father. Just be there, be consistent, and watch for the moment when intervention becomes necessary. What she couldn't know then was how soon that moment would arrive, or how dramatically it would alter the trajectory of both Lily's life and her own. December arrived with a theatrical flourish, bringing swirling snow that transformed Oakwood into a scene from a New England postcard. The library windows frosted along their edges, and the children's section bloomed with paper snowflakes and construction paper wreaths created during weekend craft sessions. A small artificial tree appeared near the circulation desk, its branches gradually filling with ornaments made by young patrons. Eleanor watched Lily's reaction to these changes carefully. The girl approached the holiday decorations with the same cautious curiosity she showed toward most things, observing from a distance before venturing closer, studying the details with solemn attention. She never participated in making ornaments or decorations, though Eleanor had invited her repeatedly, choosing instead to watch other children's excited participation from her usual spot in the reading nook. "Don't you want to make a snowflake for the window?" Eleanor asked one Saturday afternoon, bringing scissors and folded paper to Lily's corner. The girl looked up from her book. She'd progressed from Matilda to A Wrinkle in Time, confirming Eleanor's assessment of her advanced reading level, and shook her head. "No, thank you," she said politely. "I'm not very good at crafts." Eleanor sat down, setting the materials on a nearby table. "Neither am I, to be honest. But that's not really the point, is it? Sometimes it's just fun to create something, even if it's not perfect." Lily considered this, her green eyes thoughtful. "Dad says Christmas is a waste of money," she said finally. "We don't have decorations at our house." The casual statement, delivered without self-pity, squeezed Eleanor's heart. "Well, that's one perspective," she said carefully. "But there are ways to celebrate that don't cost anything, like making paper snowflakes, or singing carols, or just enjoying the lights around town. We used to have Christmas before Mom died," Lily continued, her finger tracing the edge of her book absently. "She made cookies shaped like stars, and we had a real tree with lights. Dad liked it then." Eleanor nodded, understanding the unspoken narrative beneath these fragments. Karen Pearson's death had marked not just the loss of a mother and wife but the end of normalcy, of family traditions, of the structure that had kept Daniel's darker tendencies in check. "People grieve in different ways," Eleanor said gently. "Sometimes it's hard for grown-ups to continue traditions that remind them of someone they've lost." "I remember, though," Lily said, a rare intensity coloring her voice. "I remember everything about our Christmases. Dad thinks I was too little, but I wasn't." "Of course you weren't," Eleanor agreed. "Those memories are important." Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied with this validation. After a moment, she hesitantly reached for the folded paper and scissors. "Maybe I could try making one snowflake," she conceded. "For the library, not for home." "I'd like that," Eleanor smiled. And maybe you could help me hang it up afterward. I'm not very tall, you know? This earned a small smile from Lily, one of the rare, genuine expressions that transformed her serious face into that of the child she actually was, rather than the miniature adult she so often presented to the world. They worked side by side for 20 minutes, Eleanor demonstrating the folding technique and Lily following with meticulous precision. When they unfolded the final product, Lily's snowflake revealed an intricate pattern of diamonds and curves, expertly cut despite her claimed lack of skill. "That's beautiful, Lily," Eleanor exclaimed. "You have quite an artistic touch." The girl studied her creation with critical eyes. "It's okay," she allowed. "Can we put it on the window near my reading spot?" "Of course. It's your snowflake, so you should choose where it goes." They found tape and carefully affixed the delicate paper creation to the window overlooking the library's small garden, now dusted with snow. Standing back to admire their work, Eleanor noticed something she hadn't before. A small smile playing at the corners of Lily's mouth as she gazed at her contribution to the library's festive atmosphere. "It's like it's watching over my spot," Lily said softly. "A guardian snowflake," Eleanor suggested, "making sure your reading nook stays safe and cozy." Lily nodded, the concept clearly appealing to her. "Yes, like that." The moment of connection warmed Eleanor more than the library's struggling heating system ever could. These small breakthroughs, a snowflake created, a smile freely given, a personal thought shared, had become the milestones by which she measured progress in her relationship with Lily. Since meeting Daniel Pearson 3 weeks earlier, Eleanor had seen Lily almost daily. The girl arrived after school like clockwork, sometimes staying until closing, other times collected by her father at unpredictable hours. The pattern seemed to depend on Daniel's work schedule, or perhaps his drinking schedule, Eleanor suspected. On the days Daniel picked Lily up, Eleanor observed their interactions closely. Sometimes he appeared relatively sober, asking Lily about her day or the books she'd read with what seemed like genuine interest. Other times, his eyes had that glazed quality Eleanor recognized from her own childhood. His movements slightly uncoordinated, his attention fragmenting mid-conversation. The bruise on Lily's cheek had faded, and no new visible injuries had appeared. Yet Eleanor remained vigilant, noting how the girl's demeanor shifted in her father's presence. The tightening of her small shoulders, the careful monitoring of his mood, the way she anticipated his needs before he voiced them. Classical signs of a child walking on eggshells, Eleanor knew. The familiar dance of trying to prevent a volatile adult from erupting by managing their environment and emotions, a responsibility no child should bear, yet one Lily had clearly assumed. Tom had noticed it too. "She's like a little barometer," he commented one evening after Daniel had collected Lily, slightly unsteady on his feet despite the early hour, always measuring the atmospheric pressure around him. "Exactly," Eleanor agreed, relieved that someone else saw what she did. "The question is whether his bad nights involve more than just breaking dishes and picture frames." "The bruise on her face when she came back," Tom reminded her soberly. "That wasn't from falling downstairs." "No," Eleanor sighed. "It wasn't." Still, without direct disclosure from Lily or witnessing abuse firsthand, Eleanor remained in the frustrated position of concerned observer rather than active intervener. She had documented everything, Daniel's occasional slurred speech, Lily's comments about lacking food at home, the bruise, the bad nights, but hadn't yet contacted Child Protective Services, fearing their investigation might not meet the threshold for action and could potentially make Lily's situation worse if Daniel realized she had spoken to someone. It was a delicate balance that weighed on Eleanor constantly, coloring even her time away from the library. She found herself lying awake at night, wondering if Lily was safe, if Daniel was having one of his bad nights, if the girl was huddled under her blankets reading with a flashlight while chaos unfolded beyond her bedroom door. "You've become quite invested in this child," her sister Maggie observed during a Sunday afternoon phone call. "More than your usual professional concern." "She reminds me of us," Eleanor admitted, "of how we used to hide in our room with books when Dad was drinking. Except we had Mom to buffer the worst of it," Maggie reminded her. "Who's buffering for this little girl?" The question lingered with Eleanor, unanswerable yet demanding resolution. A week before Christmas, the library staff planned their annual holiday gathering, an early closing on Thursday followed by dinner at Antonio's, the Italian restaurant down the street. The tradition had been maintained for as long as Eleanor had worked there, a chance for the usually reserved library staff to relax and celebrate together before dispersing for holiday vacations. "We're closing at 4 tomorrow instead of 6, Eleanor reminded Lily on Wednesday afternoon. "For the staff holiday party." Lily looked up from her book, a flicker of disappointment crossing her face. "Oh, I didn't know. There's a sign on the front door," Eleanor said, then immediately regretted the gentle reproach when she saw Lily's expression fall further. Of course the girl hadn't noticed the sign. Her focus on reaching the safety of the library likely precluded attention to such details. "I'm sorry about the short notice," Eleanor added quickly. "Will your dad be able to pick you up earlier?" "He's working until 6, Lily said, a hint of anxiety entering her voice. "But it's okay. I can go to the park or something." The thought of Lily waiting in a park for 2 hours in December, with temperatures barely above freezing and darkness falling by 4:30, was unacceptable to Eleanor. "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "It's much too cold for that. Let me think." She considered her options. The professional boundary she had maintained, despite bending it occasionally, prevented her from offering to take Lily home herself or to her apartment until Daniel finished work. Yet she couldn't in good conscience turn the child out into the winter afternoon with nowhere to go. "What if I call your father?" she suggested. "Perhaps he could arrange for someone else to pick you up, or take a break from work." "No," Lily said quickly, alarm flashing across her face. "Please don't call him at work. He gets really mad when people bother him there." The response confirmed what Eleanor had suspected. Daniel's temper was a source of genuine fear for his daughter. "All right," she said soothingly. "We'll figure something else out." After a moment's consideration, she offered, "How about this? The staff party doesn't start until 5:30. I need to stay and lock up after everyone leaves at 4, and then I'll be working on some end-of-year reports until I head to the restaurant. You could stay with me in my office until your father is done with work." Relief washed over Lily's face. "Really? I wouldn't be in the way." "Not at all. You could read or draw, and I'd just be working at my desk. It's not an official library program, just a quiet place for you to wait where it's warm and safe." "Thank you," Lily said, gratitude evident in her voice. "I promise I'll be very quiet." "I know you will," Eleanor smiled. "Make sure to bring enough books to keep yourself occupied." The next day unfolded according to plan. The library closed at 4, with most staff members departing immediately to prepare for the evening gathering. Tom lingered, helping Eleanor process the day's returns. "You're sure about this arrangement with Lily?" he asked in a low voice, glancing toward the girl who sat reading at a table near Eleanor's office. "It's skirting awfully close to that line we discussed." "What was I supposed to do, Tom? Send her to sit in the park in freezing weather for 2 hours?" He held up his hands in surrender. "I'm not criticizing, just checking that you've thought it through." "I have," Eleanor said firmly. "I'll be here anyway, finishing the budget projections for the quarterly report. She'll just be reading quietly in my office. It's the most appropriate solution under the circumstances." Tom nodded, apparently satisfied. "All right, I'll see you at Antonio's around 5:30. Then, I'll be there as soon as Daniel picks her up," Eleanor confirmed. After Tom left, Eleanor locked the front doors and turned to Lily with a smile. "Well, now we have the whole library to ourselves. Would you like to see my office?" Lily nodded, gathering her books and following Eleanor through the staff door and down a short hallway. The head librarian's office was modest but pleasant, with large windows overlooking the garden and bookshelves lining 2 walls. A desk occupied one corner, while a small conference table with 4 chairs filled the remaining space. "You can sit here," Eleanor said, pulling out a chair at the conference table. "Would you like some hot chocolate while you read? I was about to make some for myself." "Yes, please," Lily said, setting her books down carefully. "Your office is nice." It has lots of windows. I like the natural light, Eleanor agreed, especially in winter when the sunlight is so precious. While Eleanor prepared hot chocolate in the small staff kitchenette adjoining her office, Lily explored the bookshelves with interest, running her finger along the spines of reference materials and professional texts. These aren't like the books in the library, she observed when Eleanor returned with 2 steaming mugs. No, these are mostly for librarians. Books about how to organize information, manage library programs, that sort of thing. Eleanor set Lily's mug on the table beside her books. Not very exciting reading for most people. I think it would be nice to be a librarian, Lily said thoughtfully, returning to her seat. You get to be around books all day, and you help people find what they need. Eleanor smiled, touched by the girl's perception of her profession. That's exactly right. It's a wonderful job for people who love books and helping others. They settled into a comfortable silence, Lily reading her latest selection, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, while Eleanor focused on budget spreadsheets. Occasionally, they exchanged comments about something they were reading, or Eleanor would get up to refill their mugs, but mostly they coexisted peacefully in the quiet office space. At 10 minutes to 6, Lily began gathering her things unprompted, organizing her books and carefully wiping a small chocolate ring her mug had left on the table. Dad will be done soon, she explained, zipping her backpack. I should wait by the front door so he can see me. I'll come with you, Eleanor said, saving her work and shutting down her computer. She'd have to finish the budget projections tomorrow. They were already late for the staff gathering at Antonio's. As they walked through the darkened library toward the entrance, Eleanor noticed how the holiday decorations cast whimsical shadows in the dimmed lighting. Lily's paper snowflake was just visible on the window, illuminated by the security lights outside. It looks like it's glowing, Lily said, noticing it too. It does, like it's made of starlight instead of paper. They reached the front doors, where Eleanor turned on the exterior lights to ensure Daniel would see them waiting. Through the glass, they could see snow had begun falling again, large flakes drifting lazily in the yellow glow of the street lamps. It's so pretty, Lily breathed, pressing her palm against the cold glass. Like we're inside a snow globe. Eleanor checked her watch. 5:58 p.m. Your dad should be here any minute, she said, hoping it was true. The staff would be wondering where she was by now. They waited in companionable silence, watching the snow accumulate on the library steps. 6 o'clock came and went, then 6:10. At 6:15, Eleanor began to worry. Is your dad usually on time when he picks you up? She asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Lily shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Sometimes he's late if work is busy, or if he stops somewhere after. The ambiguous somewhere hung in the air between them, its implication clear to Eleanor if not fully articulated by Lily. At 6:30, with still no sign of Daniel, Eleanor made a decision. I need to call the restaurant and let my colleagues know I'm delayed, she explained, pulling out her phone. And then we should try calling your dad to see if he's on his way. Lily's expression tightened with anxiety. He doesn't like it when people call his phone. I understand, Eleanor said gently, but it's getting quite late, and we need to know when he's coming. Do you have his number? After a moment's hesitation, Lily recited a phone number, which Eleanor dialed. It went straight to voicemail. This is Dan. Leave a message. The gruff recording gave no indication of whether the phone was simply turned off or if Daniel was deliberately avoiding calls. Mr. Pearson, this is Eleanor Walsh from the Oakwood Library, she said after the beep. Lily is still here with me, and we're wondering what time you'll be arriving to pick her up. Please call back when you get this message. She left her cell number before hanging up. Now what? Lily asked, her voice small. Eleanor considered her options. The most appropriate solution would be to wait at the library until Daniel arrived, but that could mean missing the entire staff gathering, and there was no guarantee he would come at all. If he'd been drinking after work, or during, for that matter, he might have forgotten about Lily entirely. The alternative was to bring Lily to Antonio's with her, which would raise eyebrows among her colleagues and further blur the line between professional and personal involvement. Yet leaving the girl alone at the library was unthinkable, and sending her out into the snowy night even more so. How would you feel about coming with me to the restaurant where my colleagues are having dinner? Eleanor asked. It's just down the street, and your dad could pick you up there when he's ready. They have excellent pasta. Lily's eyes widened slightly. Really? I wouldn't be interrupting. Not at all. It's just a casual gathering, and I'm sure everyone would be happy to have you join us. Eleanor made a mental note to text Tom and warn him of the additional guest. Okay, Lily agreed, seeming more curious than concerned about this unexpected development. I've never been to a restaurant with tablecloths before. The innocuous comment revealed yet another dimension of Lily's restricted existence. Another simple childhood experience she'd been denied. Eleanor felt the familiar ache of knowing how much this bright, resilient child was missing. Not just material comforts but the ordinary pleasures and security that should be every child's birthright. Well, then this will be a treat, she said, keeping her tone light despite the heaviness in her heart. Let me just text my friend Tom to let him know we're on our way. As she tapped out a brief message explaining the situation, Eleanor's phone suddenly rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. Hello, this is Dan Pearson, came the slightly slurred voice on the other end. Got your message about Lily. Yes, Mr. Pearson, Eleanor said, automatically straightening her posture though he couldn't see her. We were wondering when you might be arriving to pick her up. Yeah, about that. There was background noise, voices, music, the unmistakable ambience of a bar. Got held up at work, then stopped for one drink with the guys. Might be another hour or so. Eleanor glanced at Lily, who was watching her intently, clearly trying to gauge the conversation from Eleanor's expressions. I see, she said carefully. Well, I'm actually heading to a dinner with my colleagues right now. Lily and I were just about to walk over to Antonio's restaurant. Perhaps you could meet us there when you're free. There was a pause, followed by a sound that might have been a suppressed belch. Yeah, sure. Antonio's on Main Street, right? I'll be there soon as I can. We look forward to seeing you, Eleanor said, injecting a formality into her tone that she hoped would remind him of his parental responsibilities. Lily and I will be having dinner in the meantime. She hung up, meeting Lily's questioning gaze. Your dad is finishing up some work, then he'll meet us at the restaurant, she explained, softening the reality of where Daniel actually was. So we'll go ahead and have dinner, and he'll join us later. Lily nodded, accepting this information with the same resigned understanding she showed toward all her father's shortcomings. Okay. They donned their coats and stepped out into the gently falling snow, Eleanor locking the library behind them. The walk to Antonio's took less than 5 minutes, but it transformed the world around them into a winter wonderland, streetlights casting golden halos through the falling flakes, holiday decorations twinkling from storefronts. It's like magic, Lily breathed, tilting her face upward to catch snowflakes on her cheeks. Eleanor smiled, seeing the ordinary small-town street through the child's eyes. It is rather magical, isn't it? When they reached Antonio's, warm light spilled from its windows onto the snowy sidewalk. Through the glass, Eleanor could see her colleagues already gathered around a long table in the back, Tom gesturing animatedly as he told some story that had the others laughing. Ready? She asked Lily, who was staring at the restaurant with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The girl nodded, squaring her small shoulders as if preparing for a challenge. Inside, they were greeted by the rich aromas of garlic, tomato sauce, and baking bread. Antonio himself, a burly man with a magnificent mustache, recognized Eleanor immediately. Ah, Ms. Walsh, your friends are already here, he boomed, then noticed Lily standing slightly behind Eleanor. And who is this young lady? This is Lily, Eleanor explained. She'll be joining us for dinner and waiting for her father to arrive. Excellent. Every child should experience Antonio's famous spaghetti, he declared, leading them toward the table where the library staff had gathered. Tom caught Eleanor's eye as they approached, raising an eyebrow in silent question. She gave a small nod, indicating everything was under control, and he immediately stood to pull out chairs for both of them. Everyone, you know Eleanor, and this is her special guest, Lily, Tom announced as they seated themselves. Lily is one of our most dedicated young patrons. The other staff members, Diane from Circulation, Steve from Technical Services, Marina the Children's Librarian, and 2 part-time assistants, greeted them warmly, making room and immediately including Lily in their conversation about favorite books. As Eleanor had hoped, the dinner proved to be a positive experience for Lily. The girl initially responded to questions with her typical careful politeness, but gradually relaxed as the evening progressed, even laughing at Tom's terrible library puns. When a plate of spaghetti and meatballs arrived before her, on the house for the young bibliophile, Antonio insisted, her eyes widened with delight. "This is the best food I've ever had," she declared after her first bite. A statement so sincerely delivered that it brought both smiles and hidden concern to the adults around the table. As 8 o'clock approached with still no sign of Daniel, Eleanor began checking her phone more frequently. She had texted him the exact address, but received no response. The other staff members, understanding the situation without needing details explained, maintained a cheerful atmosphere while occasionally exchanging worried glances with Eleanor. By 8:30, with dessert finished and Lily starting to yawn despite her best efforts to stay alert, Eleanor made another call to Daniel's phone. This time, it didn't even ring before going to voicemail. "He must have turned it off," she told Tom quietly, while Lily was distracted by Marina, showing her how to fold a paper napkin into a swan. "Or the battery died. What's plan B?" Tom asked, keeping his voice low. Eleanor sighed, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. "I don't know. I can't very well take her home with me, but I can't just wait here indefinitely either. Could you drive her home? Maybe her dad is there by now." "Maybe," Eleanor conceded, though she doubted it. If Daniel had left the bar, she suspected it was to continue drinking elsewhere, not to return to an empty house. "I'll give it another half hour, then try that approach." But at 8:45, just as Eleanor was preparing to suggest they leave, Lily tugged at her sleeve. "I'm really tired," the girl admitted, her eyelids drooping despite her obvious effort to stay awake. "Could I maybe put my head down for a little while?" "Of course, sweetheart," Eleanor said, the endearment slipping out before she could catch herself. She arranged her scarf as a makeshift pillow on the table, and Lily immediately rested her head on it, falling asleep within minutes. The sight of the exhausted child, worn out from maintaining her careful composure among strangers, made something shift inside Eleanor. A line had been crossed tonight, but not by her, by Daniel Pearson, who had abdicated his parental responsibility so completely that his 8-year-old daughter was now sleeping on a restaurant table while waiting for him to remember her existence. "I'm going to drive her home," she told Tom decisively. "If her father isn't there, I'll figure something out." Tom nodded, understanding the unspoken implications. "Want me to come with you? Might be better to have a witness, whatever the situation." Eleanor considered this, then nodded gratefully. "Yes, I think that would be wise." They made their goodbyes to the remaining staff members, who had watched the evening unfold with increasing concern. Diane helped wrap some leftover bread and pasta for the little one when she wakes up, while Steve insisted on paying Eleanor's portion of the bill. "Let us know what happens," Marina whispered as she hugged Eleanor goodbye. "And if you need anything at all, just call." With gentle care, Tom lifted the sleeping Lily, who barely stirred as he carried her to Eleanor's car parked behind the library. They settled her in the back seat, fastening the seatbelt around her slumped form, and Eleanor covered her with the emergency blanket she kept in her trunk. "Cedar Lane, right?" Tom confirmed as they pulled away from the curb. Eleanor nodded, navigating the now-deserted streets where snow continued to fall, transforming the town into a silent, white landscape that belied the turbulence of the evening. When they reached 247 Cedar Lane, Eleanor's suspicions were confirmed. The duplex was completely dark, no vehicle in the driveway. Daniel Pearson had not returned home. "Now what?" Tom asked, voicing the question that had been building in Eleanor's mind throughout the drive. She stared at the darkened house, weighing impossible options. She could wake Lily and leave her here alone, but the thought of the child entering a cold, Empty house to wait for a father who might return intoxicated and volatile was unthinkable. She could take Lily to her own apartment temporarily, but that would cross professional boundaries so definitively that she could face consequences at work, not to mention potential legal issues. I need to see if there's a spare key, she decided finally. Maybe we can get her inside, make sure the heat is on, and leave her a note from her dad saying he got called into work or something. Breaking and entering? That's your solution. Tom's voice rose in disbelief. Not breaking if we find a key, Eleanor countered, already opening her car door. Just wait here with her. I'll check the obvious hiding spots. Before Tom could protest further, Eleanor was making her way through the snow to the duplex. She checked under the doormat, above the lintel, beneath the empty flower pot, all the usual places people concealed spare keys. Nothing. She was about to give up when she noticed the crooked mailbox had a small compartment underneath, accessible only if one knew to look for it. Inside was a tarnished key that fit perfectly in the front door lock. The door swung open to reveal a dark, cluttered living room that smelled faintly of stale beer and unwashed laundry. Eleanor fumbled for a light switch, illuminating a scene that made her heart sink. Empty bottles lined the coffee table, dirty dishes were stacked in the sink visible through a doorway to the kitchen, and what appeared to be last week's mail was scattered across the floor, as if thrown there in frustration. Moving carefully through the chaos, Eleanor located the thermostat and turned up the heat, which was set at a barely adequate 62 degrees. She then quickly explored the small house, confirming her suspicions about the living conditions but also noting touches that could only be Lily's influence. Books neatly arranged on a makeshift shelf in the girl's tiny bedroom, a row of carefully tended potted plants on the kitchen windowsill, a refrigerator magnet holding a perfect spelling test. A child desperately trying to create order amidst an adult's chaos. Eleanor returned to the car, her mind made up. The house is freezing and a complete mess, she reported to Tom. I can't leave her there alone. What's the alternative? He asked, though his expression suggested he already knew her answer. She'll come home with me tonight, Eleanor said firmly. Just until morning. Then I'll bring her back here and wait for her father to show up, if necessary. Tom sighed deeply. Ellie, that's crossing a line, I know. She met his gaze unflinchingly. But leaving a child alone in that house would be crossing a much more serious one. I'll face whatever consequences come from this decision, but I will not abandon her tonight. After a long moment, Tom nodded. All right, but document everything. The state of the house, the failed attempts to contact her father, all of it. And call me the minute he shows up tomorrow, no matter how early. I will, Eleanor promised. Relieved he wasn't going to argue further, they drove to Eleanor's apartment in contemplative silence, broken only by Lily's soft, even breathing from the back seat. The child slept on, unaware of the adult decisions swirling around her, the boundaries being crossed on her behalf. Eleanor's spare bedroom was rarely used except when her niece visited, but it was clean and comfortable with fresh linens always ready for unexpected guests. With Tom's help, she settled the still sleeping Lily onto the bed, removing only her shoes and coat before tucking the blankets around her small form. She'll be confused when she wakes up, Tom warned as they tiptoed from the room. I'll explain everything, Eleanor assured him, and I'll make it clear this is just a temporary arrangement until we can contact her father. Tom nodded, his expression troubled despite his apparent acceptance of the situation. I'll get going then. Call me if you need anything during the night. After Tom left, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, the events of the evening replaying in her mind. She had crossed a significant professional boundary by bringing Lily to her home, that much was undeniable. Yet faced with the same circumstances, she knew she would make the same choice again. Dickens padded into the kitchen, meowing quizzically at her late return. We have a guest, she told the cat softly, scratching behind his ears. So be on your best behavior. Before going to bed herself, Eleanor checked on Lily one last time. The girl had curled onto her side, one small hand tucked beneath her cheek, her breathing deep and even. In sleep, the careful composure she maintained during waking hours had dissolved, revealing the vulnerable child beneath. You deserve so much better, Eleanor whispered to the sleeping figure. So much more than what you've been given. Eleanor woke early the next morning, immediately aware of the unusual presence in her apartment. She found Lily already awake, sitting on the edge of the guest bed with a confused expression, her dark hair tousled from sleep. "Good morning," Eleanor said gently from the doorway. "I know you must be wondering where you are." Lily's eyes were wide but not fearful. "This isn't my house," she stated, a question implicit in her tone. "No, it's my apartment," Eleanor explained, entering the room slowly and sitting beside Lily on the bed, careful to maintain some distance. "You fell asleep at the restaurant last night, and when we tried to take you home, your dad wasn't there yet. I couldn't leave you alone in an empty house, so I brought you here for the night." Lily absorbed this information, her brow furrowed. "Is Dad okay?" she asked finally. The question, her first concern being for her father rather than herself, spoke volumes about the reversal of roles in their relationship. "I'm sure he's fine," Eleanor assured her, though she had no such certainty. "We'll try calling him again after breakfast." "Are you hungry?" Lily nodded, sliding off the bed and automatically straightening the covers before following Eleanor to the kitchen. Dickens greeted them with an imperious meow, arching his back and fixing Lily with a penetrating stare. "That's Dickens," Eleanor explained. "He thinks he owns the apartment and just lets me live here." This elicited a small smile from Lily. "He's beautiful," she said, cautiously extending a hand for the cat to sniff. Dickens considered the offering briefly before butting his head against her fingers, a sign of approval that made Lily's smile widen. While preparing pancakes, a weekend treat Eleanor rarely indulged in when alone, she tried Daniel's phone again. Still no answer. She left another message, explaining the situation in neutral terms and providing her address with a request for him to come as soon as possible. "I've been thinking," she told Lily as they sat down to breakfast. "After we eat, I'll take you home. Your dad is probably there by now, wondering where you are." Lily nodded, but there was something in her expression, a shadow of knowledge beyond her years, that suggested she doubted this optimistic scenario. "What if he's not there?" she asked, cutting her pancake into careful, even pieces. Eleanor had considered this possibility throughout her restless night. "Then we'll wait for him together," she said. "And if it takes a while, perhaps we could stop by the library for some books to pass the time." This suggestion brightened Lily's mood considerably, and she ate with more enthusiasm, occasionally slipping small bites of pancake to Dickens, who had positioned himself strategically beside her chair. By 9 o'clock, they were in Eleanor's car heading toward Cedar Lane. Lily sat quietly in the passenger seat, her small fingers fidgeting with the zipper of her coat, betraying the anxiety she otherwise concealed. When they turned onto her street, Lily suddenly sat up straighter. "Dad's truck is there," she said, pointing to a battered pickup now parked in the driveway of the duplex. Relief washed through Eleanor. At least they wouldn't be faced with another unexplained absence. But as she parked behind the truck, a new concern emerged. In what state would they find Daniel after his night of drinking? And how would he react to discovering his daughter had spent the night at a stranger's home? "Let me go in first," Lily said suddenly, her hand on the door handle before Eleanor had fully stopped the car. "Just to make sure he's okay." The implication that Daniel might not be okay, and that Lily needed to assess the situation before Eleanor entered, sent warning signals flaring in Eleanor's mind. "I think we should go in together," she said firmly. "I need to explain why you stayed at my apartment last night." Lily hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Sometimes he's still sad in the mornings, after the special soda nights." "I understand," Eleanor said, though her heart ached at the euphemism. Her own father had been sad many mornings after drinking binges, irritable, nauseous, unable to bear normal volumes of noise or light. She remembered tiptoeing around the house, helping her mother maintain the fragile peace of those hung-over mornings. They approached the front door together, Lily uncharacteristically lagging behind rather than leading the way. Eleanor knocked firmly, then waited, aware of Lily's increasing tension beside her. No answer came. Eleanor knocked again, louder, This time, they heard movement inside. A thud, a muffled curse, heavy footsteps approaching. The door swung open to reveal Daniel Pearson, unshaven and disheveled, clearly suffering the aftermath of excessive drinking. He squinted at them in the morning light, recognition slowly dawning in his bloodshot eyes. "Lily?" he croaked, voice rough from alcohol and sleep. His gaze shifted to Eleanor, confusion giving way to defensive hostility. "Who the hell are you? What's going on?" "Mr. Pearson, I'm Eleanor Walsh, the librarian from Oakwood Public Library," she said calmly, though her heart was racing. "We met a few weeks ago when you picked Lily up." He stared at her blankly, then ran a hand over his face. "Right? The library lady. What are you doing here? Why is Lily with you?" "May we come in?" Eleanor asked, aware they were creating a spectacle for any neighbors who might be watching. "I can explain everything." Daniel stepped back grudgingly, allowing them to enter. The house was in even worse condition than Eleanor had seen the previous night, if that were possible. Empty beer bottles had been added to the collection on the coffee table, and the sour smell of alcohol hung in the air. Lily immediately began moving through the room, picking up bottles and carrying them to the kitchen, her movements practiced and efficient. The sight of the 8-year-old child automatically cleaning up her father's mess without being asked made Eleanor's throat tighten with emotion. "Mr. Pearson," she began, choosing her words carefully, "last night you agreed to meet Lily and me at Antonio's restaurant after work. When you didn't arrive by 8:30, we tried calling but couldn't reach you. It was too late to bring Lily back to an empty house, so she stayed overnight in my guest room. I left several messages explaining the situation." Daniel listened with a confused frown, clearly trying to piece together fragmented memories from the previous evening. "I don't remember any restaurant," he muttered. "Must have lost track of time." Lost track of time. The familiar euphemism for drinking until blackout echoed Eleanor's childhood with painful precision. "Dad, it's okay," Lily interjected, returning from the kitchen. "Ms. Walsh made pancakes for breakfast, and they had a tablecloth at the restaurant. And her cat is named Dickens, like the author." The mundane details seemed to penetrate Daniel's hangover fog, bringing with them a dawning awareness of his failure. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time that morning. "I messed up again, didn't I, kiddo?" he said, his voice softening. "It's okay," Lily repeated, the absolution of a child who had learned to parent her parent. "I was safe with Ms. Walsh." Daniel turned to Eleanor, embarrassment now mingling with the defensive hostility in his expression. "I appreciate you looking after her," he said stiffly. "Won't happen again." "Mr. Pearson," Eleanor began, uncertain how to proceed but knowing she couldn't leave without addressing the situation directly. "I understand that parenting alone can be incredibly challenging, especially after a loss. There are resources available, support groups, counseling services, that might be helpful." His expression hardened immediately. "We're doing fine," he snapped. "I don't need some librarian telling me how to raise my kid." "Dad," Lily said softly, touching his arm. "Ms. Walsh is just being nice." The gentle rebuke from his daughter seemed to penetrate Daniel's defensiveness in a way Eleanor's words couldn't. He deflated slightly, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "Yeah, sorry," he muttered. "Just a rough night. I'm fine now." The claim was belied by his bloodshot eyes and trembling hands, but Eleanor recognized the conversation had reached its limit. Pushing further would only entrench his resistance and potentially make Lily's situation worse. "I should get going," she said, reaching into her purse to retrieve a business card. "This has my personal cell number on the back. If either of you need anything at all, please call." Lily took the card before her father could refuse it, carefully tucking it into her pocket. "Thank you for the pancakes," she said solemnly, "and for letting me meet Dickens." "You're welcome anytime," Eleanor replied, meaning it more deeply than professional boundaries should allow. She turned to Daniel. "The library is closing early next week for the holidays. The schedule is on our website." He nodded, clearly eager for her to leave. "Got it. Thanks again." As Eleanor walked back to her car, a profound sense of unease settled over her. She had returned Lily to her father as propriety and law required, but every instinct told her the child was not truly safe in that house. Daniel's drinking was clearly progressing, not improving, and his ability to care for Lily seemed increasingly compromised. She called Tom from the car, providing a brief update that confirmed his concerns without alleviating them. "I'll document everything," she assured him. "But honestly, Tom, I don't know how much longer this can continue before something serious happens." "Have you reached the point of calling CPS?" he asked. Eleanor sighed, watching the duplex recede in her rearview mirror. "Almost, but without more concrete evidence of abuse rather than neglect. I'm afraid they'll just file a report and move on. And then Daniel will know someone reported him, which could make things worse for Lily." "So we wait for something worse to happen?" Tom's frustration mirrored her own. "No," Eleanor said firmly. "We keep building documentation, and I stay as connected to Lily as possible. The moment I see something definitive, I'm making that call." What Eleanor couldn't articulate, even to Tom, was the growing sense that time was running out, that the steadily deteriorating situation in the Pearson household was approaching a breaking point, and Lily was the one most likely to be broken in the process. The week before Christmas passed in a blur of holiday programs and increased library traffic. Lily continued her daily visits, though Eleanor noticed her growing thinner, the shadows under her eyes darkening despite her insistence that everything at home was fine. Daniel appeared occasionally to pick her up, sometimes relatively sober, other times with the glassy-eyed look and uncoordinated movements that signaled drinking. On those days, Eleanor would offer to drive Lily home herself, but Daniel always refused, his pride evidently wounded by her previous intervention. "Please call me if you need anything," she reminded Lily after each encounter, receiving a solemn nod in return. 2 days before Christmas, the library hosted its annual holiday party for children, complete with cookies, hot chocolate, and a staff member dressed as Santa distributing donated books as gifts. Eleanor had personally wrapped the Chronicles of Narnia collection for Lily, knowing the girl had fallen in love with the first book in the series. But Lily didn't appear at the scheduled time. As the party progressed with no sign of her, Eleanor's concern deepened. It wasn't like Lily to miss a library event, particularly one involving books. "Maybe they went away for the holidays," Tom suggested when he noticed Eleanor watching the door. Without mentioning it, Eleanor shook her head. "Lily would have told me." When the party ended and the library closed early for the holiday weekend, Eleanor made a decision. "I'm going to drive by their house," she told Tom, "just to check." He sighed but didn't argue. "Want me to come with you?" "No, enjoy your evening," Eleanor insisted. "I'm just being paranoid. She probably has a cold or something." But as she drove toward Cedar Lane through streets festively decorated for Christmas, an inexplicable sense of urgency gripped her. The rational explanation, a minor illness, a last-minute holiday activity, couldn't dispel the nagging feeling that something was wrong. When she turned onto the now familiar street, Eleanor was relieved to see lights on in the Pearson duplex and Daniel's truck in the driveway. At least they were home. She parked across the street, debating whether to approach the house or simply drive away, reassured by signs of normal activity. As she sat deliberating, movement in the front window caught her attention. Through the thin curtains, she could make out Daniel's silhouette, moving with the erratic energy she had come to recognize as intoxication. He appeared to be gesturing angrily, though she couldn't tell if anyone else was in the room with him. Then Lily appeared in the frame, her small figure rigid with tension. Even from this distance, Eleanor could see the child's defensive posture. Shoulders hunched, head slightly bowed, hands clasped tightly before her. The stance of someone anticipating a storm. Eleanor watched, frozen, as Daniel continued his agitated movements. He seemed to be shouting, though the closed windows of her car prevented her from hearing anything. Lily remained motionless, accepting the verbal barrage with the practiced stillness of long experience. Then something changed. Daniel moved toward the kitchen area, momentarily disappearing from view. When he returned, his gestures became more pronounced, his body language increasingly aggressive. Lily said something in response. Eleanor could see her lips moving, which seemed to enrage her father further. With shocking suddenness, Daniel swept his arm across what must have been the kitchen table or counter. Even from her car, Eleanor could see items flying, crashing to the floor. Lily immediately knelt to clean up the mess, her movements quick and practiced. Eleanor's heart raced as she watched this scene unfold like a silent film. The explosive anger, the child's automatic response, the terrible familiarity of the interaction suggesting it was far from the first time. She reached for her phone, uncertain whether this constituted enough evidence to call for intervention, when Daniel's next action removed all doubt. As Lily knelt collecting the scattered items, Daniel kicked at the mess, sending what looked like food spattering against the wall. When Lily flinched away, he grabbed her roughly by the arm, yanking her to her feet with such force that Eleanor gasped aloud in her car. Without conscious decision, Eleanor's fingers dialed 911, her eyes never leaving the window where the shadow play of abuse continued. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report child abuse in progress, Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. I'm witnessing a father physically assaulting his 8-year-old daughter at 247 Cedar Lane in Oakwood. Please send police immediately. Are you in the residence now, ma'am? No, I'm in my car across the street. I can see them through the front window. The father is intoxicated and violent. He just grabbed the child forcefully by the arm and yanked her up from the floor. Officers are being dispatched. Can you see what's happening now? Eleanor trained her gaze back on the window, where the situation had escalated. Daniel had shoved Lily against the wall, where she crumpled to the floor, making herself as small as possible. He loomed over her, gesticulating wildly. He's pushed her against the wall, Eleanor reported, her throat tight with fear and rage. She's on the floor now. He's shouting at her. Officers should arrive within 5 minutes. Please stay in your vehicle for your safety. But as Eleanor watched, Daniel stepped back from Lily and began removing his belt, sliding it from the loops of his jeans with deliberate menace. The gesture, its intent unmistakable even in silhouette, broke through Eleanor's last restraint. He's removing his belt, she told the dispatcher, already opening her car door. I can't wait. I'm going to intervene. Ma'am, please stay in your vehicle. Officers are almost there. But Eleanor had already dropped the phone on her seat and was running toward the house, snowflakes swirling around her in the early evening darkness. The thought of Lily, with her serious green eyes and careful ways, being struck with a belt while help was only minutes away was unbearable. She pounded on the front door with both fists, shouting at the top of her lungs. Daniel Pearson, open this door. The police are on their way. Inside, the shadows stilled. Then Daniel's silhouette moved toward the door, while Lily remained huddled on the floor. Go away, he bellowed through the closed door. This is none of your business. The police are coming, Eleanor shouted back, continuing to pound on the door. I saw what you were doing. Let me in, Daniel. Let me see Lily. Get the hell off my property. His voice was slurred but venomous. You've got no right to interfere in my family. Lily, Eleanor called, pressing her face close to the door. Lily, can you hear me? Are you okay? There was no response from the child, but Daniel's rage escalated. I said get away from my door. I'll call the cops on you for trespassing. They're already on their way, Eleanor retorted, her fear for Lily overriding any concern for her own safety. I called them because I saw you assaulting your daughter. Open this door now, or they'll break it down when they arrive. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing steadily louder. Daniel must have heard them too, because his next threat carried a note of desperation. You've made a big mistake, he growled through the door. Nobody's gonna take my kid from me. Nobody. The sirens grew louder, then cut off abruptly as police cruisers pulled up to the curb, lights flashing across the snow-covered yard. 2 officers emerged, hands near their weapons as they approached the porch where Eleanor stood. Ma'am, one officer called. Are you the 911 caller? Yes. Eleanor confirmed, stepping back to let them access the door. Daniel Pearson is inside with his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. He's intoxicated and was about to hit her with a belt when I intervened. I'm Eleanor Walsh, head librarian at Oakwood Public Library. Lily is a regular patron there. The officers exchanged a glance. Then the first one knocked authoritatively on the door. Police! Open up, Mr. Pearson. From inside came the sound of breaking glass, followed by a child's frightened cry. Without further hesitation, the second officer stepped forward and kicked the door near the lock. It took 2 attempts before the door burst open, revealing Daniel standing in the middle of the living room, belt still in hand, his expression a mask of drunken fury. Get out of my house, he shouted, swaying slightly. All of you. The officers moved in quickly, one securing Daniel while the other scanned the room for Lily. Eleanor spotted her first. A small huddled shape in the corner of the kitchen, arms wrapped protectively around her knees. Lily, she called softly, moving toward the girl while the officers dealt with Daniel, who was now being handcuffed despite his loud protests. It's Ms. Walsh. You're safe now. The child looked up, her face tear-streaked but eerily calm, as if this crisis had been anticipated for so long that its arrival brought more relief than shock. You came, she whispered. You really came. Of course I did, Eleanor said, kneeling beside her but not touching her, uncertain what injuries might be hidden beneath her clothing. I promised I'd help if you needed me, remember? Lily nodded, her eyes drifting to where her father was being restrained, his drunken protests giving way to mumbled threats. He's really mad, she observed with the detached tone of a child who had learned to analyze adult rage as a survival skill. He broke Mom's picture, the one I kept under my pillow. Eleanor followed her gaze to shards of glass on the floor, the source of the breaking sound they'd heard. Among the fragments lay a photograph of a smiling woman holding a toddler Lily at a beach, now stained with what appeared to be spaghetti sauce. I'm so sorry about your mom's picture, Eleanor said gently. Maybe we can clean it and get a new frame. Lily considered this, then shook her head. It's okay. I remember what she looked like. She hesitated, then asked in a small voice, What happens now? It was the question Eleanor had been dreading, because she didn't have a good answer. The system that would now take control of Lily's life was imperfect at best, harmful at worst. Foster care, court hearings, potential separation from everything familiar, even a violent, neglectful home would be traumatic in their own way. But before Eleanor could formulate a response, one of the officers approached, kneeling beside them. His expression softened as he addressed Lily. Hi there. I'm Officer Reynolds. What's your name? Lily Pearson, she replied automatically, her posture straightening slightly as she presented her public face. The polite, composed child Eleanor had first met at the library. Well, Lily, we need to make sure you're okay. Are you hurt anywhere? Lily shook her head, though Eleanor noticed her wince slightly when she moved her left arm, the one Daniel had yanked so roughly. I think her arm might be injured, Eleanor interjected quietly. The officer nodded. We'll have paramedics check her out. And in the meantime, we need to find a safe place for her to stay tonight. I can? Eleanor began automatically, then stopped herself, aware of the professional boundaries she had already crossed. But Lily's hand suddenly gripped hers, small fingers clinging with surprising strength. Can I stay with Ms. Walsh? She asked, a rare note of pleading in her voice. Please? She has a cat named Dickens, and she makes really good pancakes. Officer Reynolds looked between them, assessment in his gaze. You have a prior relationship with the child? He asked Eleanor. I'm the head librarian at Oakwood Public Library, she explained. Lily comes in almost every day after school. I've been concerned about her home situation for some time. Last week, when her father failed to pick her up, she stayed overnight at my apartment in the guest room. The officer considered this information. Normally, we'd place her with Child Protective Services tonight while they locate any family members. But given the circumstances and the late hour, he glanced at his partner, who was now escorting a handcuffed Daniel toward the patrol car. Let me make a call. While he stepped away to speak with someone on his radio, Eleanor turned back to Lily. "How are you really feeling?" she asked softly. "And it's okay to tell me the truth." Lily's careful composure wavered, tears welling in her eyes. "My arm hurts," she admitted, "and I'm scared. Dad's never going to forgive me for this." "Listen to me," Eleanor said firmly, finally allowing herself to take Lily's uninjured hand between both of hers. "None of this is your fault. Not one bit of it. Your dad needs help that you can't give him, help that no child should have to provide for a parent. What happened tonight was his responsibility, not yours." Lily absorbed this, doubt clear in her expression. "But if I had just cleaned up faster, or if I hadn't told him I was hungry when there wasn't any food." The revelation that Daniel's explosive rage had been triggered by his child's expression of hunger sent a wave of protective fury through Eleanor. "No," she said emphatically. "There is nothing a child could do or say that would justify what I saw tonight. Your father's actions are because of his problems, not because of anything you did." Officer Reynolds returned before Lily could respond. "Okay, here's the plan. Paramedics are outside to check Lily for injuries. Depending on what they find, we might need to take her to the hospital for further evaluation. Assuming she doesn't need hospitalization, Ms. Walsh, you've been approved as an emergency placement for tonight only, given your prior relationship and professional standing. Tomorrow morning, a social worker will contact you to arrange transfer to either a family member or temporary foster care, pending investigation." Relief flooded through Eleanor. One night wasn't much, but it would give Lily a safe, familiar place to process the trauma of the evening. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "What about her things? Clothes? Personal items?" "We can collect some essentials now with supervision," the officer explained. "Lily, can you show us what you'd need for overnight and tomorrow?" The girl nodded, her practiced self-sufficiency reasserting itself as she led them to her tiny bedroom. Unlike the chaos of the rest of the house, Lily's room was meticulously organized. The bed was neatly made with a faded but clean comforter. Books were arranged by size on the makeshift shelves, and a small collection of stuffed animals sat in a precise row along the windowsill. While Lily gathered pajamas and a change of clothes, Eleanor noticed a worn spiral notebook on the bedside table, the one in which Lily frequently wrote at the library. She picked it up, intending to add it to the growing pile of items. "That's my book journal," Lily explained, noticing Eleanor's interest. "I write down all the books I read and what I think about them. Would you like to bring it with you?" Eleanor asked, touched by this glimpse into Lily's private thoughts. The girl nodded, her eyes lingering on the journal. "It has all my favorite quotes too, for when I need to remember things." With Lily's small backpack filled with essentials, they returned to the living room where paramedics waited to examine her. Eleanor stepped back to give them space, her gaze taking in the full extent of the Pearson home's disarray. The empty bottles, the unwashed dishes, the splattered food now drying on the wall where Daniel had kicked it. Years of neglect were visible in every corner. Water stains on the ceiling, a broken window covered with cardboard, threadbare carpet worn to its backing in high-traffic areas. Yet amidst this decay were Lily's attempts at order, a stack of library books neatly arranged on an end table, a row of small potted plants on the windowsill, a handmade calendar with library hours carefully noted on each date. The contrast between these competing influences, Daniel's destructive neglect versus Lily's determined efforts to create normalcy, captured the essence of the child's existence. She had been waging a silent battle against chaos, armed only with her intelligence and resilience, for far too long. After confirming that Lily had significant bruising but no broken bones or injuries requiring immediate medical attention, the paramedics released her to Eleanor's care with instructions to follow up with a pediatrician the next day. Officer Reynolds provided paperwork authorizing the temporary placement and contact information for the social worker who would call in the morning. As they walked to Eleanor's car, Lily clutching her backpack and a stuffed rabbit she'd had since infancy, the reality of the night's events seemed to finally penetrate the girl's careful composure. She stopped suddenly, looking back at the house where a police officer was now stringing yellow tape across the door. "Is Dad going to jail?" she asked, her voice small but clear in the snowy stillness. Eleanor knelt to meet her eyes, snow dampening the knees of her slacks. He's being arrested, yes, but what happens after that will depend on many things. The most important thing right now is making sure you're safe. But who will take care of him if I'm not there? The genuine concern in Lily's voice, this child still worried about the parent who had just abused her, broke Eleanor's heart anew. Your dad is a grown-up, she said gently. It's his job to take care of himself, and it's other grown-ups' job to take care of you. That's how it's supposed to be, Lily, not the other way around. The girl considered this radical proposition, that she was not responsible for her father's welfare, with the serious contemplation she brought to all new ideas. Finally, she nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. Can we go now? She asked simply. I'm really tired. Of course, Eleanor said, rising and taking her uninjured hand. Let's go home. As they drove away from Cedar Lane, leaving behind the flashing lights and yellow tape and all the visible evidence of a family in crisis, Eleanor glanced at Lily in the passenger seat. The girl was staring out the window at the gently falling snow, her profile illuminated intermittently by passing streetlights. Tomorrow will be challenging, Eleanor said carefully. There will be a lot of questions, and decisions to make about where you'll stay until things are figured out. I know, Lily replied, her voice quiet but steady. I'll be brave. You already are, Eleanor assured her. Braver than anyone should have to be at 8 years old. They lapsed into silence as the car continued through the snow-covered streets, passing houses decorated with Christmas lights and wreaths, families visible through windows sharing meals or opening gifts. The contrast between those scenes of normalcy and the trauma they had just navigated was stark and painful. Yet as they approached Eleanor's apartment building, she felt Lily relax slightly beside her, some of the rigid tension leaving her small body. For tonight at least, the girl was safe. The immediate danger had passed. What would happen tomorrow, with social services, potential family placements, court hearings, and all the bureaucratic machinery that would now engage with Lily's life, remained uncertain. But Eleanor made a silent promise as she parked her car and prepared to lead this resilient, wounded child into the sanctuary of her home. Whatever came next, Lily would not face it alone. The moment Eleanor had feared and anticipated for months had finally arrived. The crisis point where observation gave way to intervention, where concern transformed into action. She had crossed professional boundaries that could not be uncrossed, made decisions that could not be unmade. But looking at Lily's face in the dim light of the car, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choices again. Because sometimes the true measure of responsibility wasn't adhering to established boundaries, but recognizing when those boundaries must give way to a more fundamental imperative. Protecting a child who had no one else to stand between her and harm. Come on, Eleanor said gently, reaching for Lily's backpack. Let's get you inside where it's warm. Dickens will be waiting. And together they walked through the falling snow toward the light of Eleanor's apartment. Two lives now irrevocably connected by the events of a December evening, when a librarian had looked through the glass of a window and refused to look away from what she saw there. The days following Daniel Pearson's arrest unfolded with bureaucratic precision. Meredith Jacobson, the assigned social worker, interviewed Lily thoroughly while Eleanor provided her documented observations from the past months. The evidence was overwhelming. Daniel's alcoholism had progressed to dangerous levels, leaving Lily not only neglected but now physically abused. We've located the maternal aunt and uncle, Meredith informed Eleanor 3 days after the incident. Jessica and Michael Taylor. They live in Fairfield, just one town over. They didn't know? Eleanor asked, unable to keep the incredulity from her voice. Karen's sister and her husband, Meredith explained. They'd lost touch after Karen's death. Daniel apparently rejected their help initially, then stopped responding to calls. They've been trying to reconnect for over a year. The Taylors arrived at the DCF office that afternoon. Jessica, a woman with the same green eyes as Lily, and Michael, a quiet, steady presence beside her. Their shock at learning of Lily's situation was palpable. Their grief at having failed to reach her earlier even more so. We should have tried harder, Jessica kept saying, tears streaming down her face after hearing the details of the neglect and abuse. "We knew how Daniel was struggling, but we never imagined." The court moved swiftly. Daniel, still in custody and now facing charges of child endangerment and assault, was ordered to undergo substance abuse treatment before any visitation would be considered. The Taylors received temporary guardianship of Lily, with permanent arrangements to be determined after a 6-month evaluation period. Eleanor, present at each hearing as both witness and support for Lily, watched the legal machinery process the human tragedy with methodical efficiency. Forms were filed, testimonies recorded, evaluations scheduled. The system that had seemed so intimidating now worked with surprising clarity toward one goal: Lily's safety and well-being. 6 months later, on a warm June afternoon, Eleanor sat in her office reviewing summer reading program registrations when her phone rang. "She's asking for you again," Jessica Taylor said without preamble. "We're having a small celebration this weekend. The guardianship is being made permanent. Daniel signed the papers yesterday. She wants you to come." Eleanor had maintained contact with Lily throughout the transition, first through supervised visits at the DCF office, then occasional dinners with the Taylors as Lily settled into her new life. The girl was thriving in ways Eleanor had only hoped for: proper nutrition filling out her thin frame, regular sleep erasing the shadows beneath her eyes, therapy helping her process the trauma and guilt she carried. "I wouldn't miss it," Eleanor replied. The Taylor home sat on a quiet street in Fairfield, a modest colonial with a well-tended garden and a tire swing hanging from an oak tree in the front yard. As Eleanor approached the door, gift-wrapped books in hand, it opened to reveal Lily, changed in subtle but significant ways from the solemn child she'd first met in the library. "Ms. Walsh," she called, breaking into a smile that no longer seemed to require permission. "You came." "Of course I did," Eleanor replied, accepting the hug Lily now offered freely, another sign of her healing. "I brought you something." Inside, the house hummed with modest celebration. Jessica had prepared Lily's favorite foods. Michael had hung a banner reading "Forever Family" across the dining room, and a small cake waited on the table. It wasn't lavish or excessive, but it was warm and intentional, everything the Pearson household had not been. "Daniel's doing better," Jessica told Eleanor quietly as they watched Lily showing Michael a science project from school. "The rehab program seems to be working this time. He's 8 months sober." "Will he have visitation?" Eleanor asked. "Eventually, if he stays on track. Supervised at first." Jessica's expression was complex: grief for her sister, anger at her brother-in-law, hope for her niece's future all mingled together. "Lily says she wants to see him when he's better. That's her choice to make, when the time comes." After cake and presents, Lily led Eleanor to her new bedroom, a cheerful space with yellow walls, a proper desk for homework, and bookshelves filled with both old favorites from the library and new editions. "Aunt Jessica helped me make this," Lily said, showing Eleanor a shadow box frame containing the damaged photograph of her mother that had been carefully restored. "So Mom can watch over me while I sleep." "It's beautiful," Eleanor said sincerely. "And look," Lily continued, moving to her bookshelf where a familiar spiral notebook sat prominently displayed. "I'm still keeping my book journal. I'm going to be a librarian someday, like you." The simple declaration, delivered with the certainty only children can muster, warmed Eleanor deeply. "You'd make an excellent librarian," she agreed. When it was time to leave, Lily walked Eleanor to her car. The summer evening was long and golden, fireflies beginning to emerge from the Taylor's garden as dusk approached. "I'm coming to the library tomorrow," Lily announced. "Aunt Jessica's bringing me for the summer reading kickoff." "I'll save you a spot in the front row," Eleanor promised. She hesitated, then added, "I'm very proud of you, Lily. You've been so brave through all of this." Lily considered this, her expression thoughtful in a way that remained familiar despite all the changes. "I didn't feel brave," she said finally. "I was just trying to survive. But now I don't have to just survive anymore. I get to live." The profound wisdom in this simple statement, the distillation of everything Lily had endured and overcome, left Eleanor momentarily speechless. This remarkable child, who had managed to remain generous and thoughtful despite years of neglect, who had found escape and solace in books when her reality offered neither, stood now on the threshold of a different kind of childhood, one with security, support, and the freedom to simply be a child. Yes, Eleanor agreed, her voice thick with emotion. That's exactly right. 6 months later, Eleanor created a special reading nook in the library dedicated to resources for children in difficult home situations, with a small, discreet sign that read, "Everyone deserves a safe place to land." When Lily visited with her aunt, she noticed a subtle addition to the children's section. A small display featuring books with resilient young protagonists, and a framed quote from Matilda that read, "Somewhere inside all of us is the power to change the world." The final threads of the story wove themselves together on a snowy December evening, exactly 1 year after the night that had changed everything. Eleanor watched from the library window as Lily left at closing time, walking hand in hand with Jessica toward their waiting car. The girl turned back to wave. Not the desperate clinging of before, but the farewell of someone who knew she could return to a place where she was valued, and then go home to safety. Eleanor, forever changed by the experience, had begun the process to become a certified foster parent, transforming her own solitary life in the process of saving Lily's. As she waved back, watching until the car's taillights disappeared into the winter darkness, Eleanor reflected on how a single decision, to pay attention, to care, to act when action was needed, had altered the trajectory of both their lives. Some lines, once crossed, created new pathways forward. Some boundaries, when breached for the right reasons, opened into territories of unexpected grace. And sometimes, the simple act of refusing to look away from another's suffering could be the first step in a journey toward healing. Not just for the one who suffered, but for the one who saw and chose to stand witness. The library stood quiet now, books shelved and waiting for tomorrow's readers. But the story that had unfolded within its walls, a story of a girl who wouldn't leave and a librarian who wouldn't abandon her, had become part of its invisible history, woven into the very fabric of the place where Lily had first found refuge and Eleanor had found purpose beyond words on a page.